Hey, what's up, guys? We have Dr. Karen Boyd here. She is here to talk about ethical AI. So, how's it going, Karen? How you doing today?
I'm doing really well. It's a beautiful day outside.
Yeah, it looks beautiful behind you with the beach and everything.
Yeah. It's hard to complain about living in San Diego, at least weather-wise, and otherwise too.
Yeah, I'm actually in the IE and
Oh
from
yeah.
Orange County, so pretty close. And San Diego is very nice. I go there to take pictures and stuff. So
Hmm.
yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll go from there?
Of course. As you mentioned, my name is Karen Boyd. I work for a small think tank attached to the San Diego Foundation. We're called the Policy and Innovation Center. We do a lot of work around equity and economics, and my specific focus is on AI. So helping people identify skilling needs around AI, make sure that people have, in particular, their AI use policies aligned with their values and goals, looking at an sort of an organizational perspective. My background, I went to school here locally at SDSU, got a master's in business from UCSD. And then in 2020, I graduated with a PhD from the School of Information at the University of Maryland, College Park, where I studied ethics, AI, and the future of work. I also did a postdoc at the University of Michigan School of Information, where I looked at automated emotion recognition technologies for use in the workplace. Extremely creepy, in short.
Yeah, wow. So how is like Maryland in comparison to San Diego? I'm assuming you actually went there, it wasn't like
I did.
online, right?
I
Yeah.
did. I with a PhD, you often only need to be there for 2 years. If you don't like, I don't have a biology lab where I gotta go like poke some organisms or something. All of our research was on the computer. So I was there for 2 years to take classes, and then I came back here for the last to basically to write the dissertation. I loved being close to Washington, D.C. There's so much stuff to do there, free museums, great public transit. The weather was a tough transition for me, but you know, to our earlier point, it's going to be a tough transition to anywhere from, you know, the beach. So,
Yeah, it's pretty much like the perfect location. So
mhm.
and then also the schools you went to are great: SDSU, UCSD. I have friends, right? SDSU,
Mhm.
UCSD. The I have friends who went to UCSD, two good friends and or three, and they loved it, and the beach is right there and everything, and you could like surf or whatever at Black's Beach and all that. So
Yeah,
uh
absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, I'm very interested, even though if you go on my podcast thing, it's not all about AI or but I'm very interested in AI consciousness, will AI become conscious, the singularity, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
And I've listened, I'm trying to, I mean, I've actually listened to a good amount of ethical AI. I mean, mostly just AI, but then the ethical AI would be like, um, when I don't know if you know, Sam Harris talks about it, or I'm like forgetting his name, the guy who came up with the simulation theory. I'm blanking on
Bostrom.
it. Yeah, exactly. So Nick Bostrom, that kind of stuff. And then also with myself, I'm actually kind of using AI to make YouTube videos. I've obviously used it to make pictures, videos, songs, all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of curious myself for what I'm doing, and like some of it almost seems too good to be true because you could just make any image you want, any video you want, and before you literally had to go out and find it. You could almost make anything you want. Obviously there's some stuff that it won't do. Like if I try to do like specific surfing locations, it won't get that right. But
Yeah.
anyway, so what are your thoughts, I guess, on the whole thing? Yeah, what are your thoughts on the whole thing and where it's going? And I guess how you feel like companies like Meta, um, XAI, OpenAI, Google are all doing, and then Anthropic is supposedly the one that's like supposed to be like the most ethical, maybe or something. I don't know, but yeah. What are your thoughts on how where it's going and how it's going so far?
Sure. Oh, this is a big and juicy question. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Um, I also have like a lot of interest in the sort of general intelligence of it all, the, singularity and super intelligence and all of that. I unfortunately am a pessimist, so I just try not to think about it too much because I find it scary. And most of my work is around more of the narrow intelligence that you're talking about, right? Like how are we using the AI that is available now for the tasks that we have now, and keeping that use to promote the values that we care about, right? So like, and also not to step on the like, what am I trying to say? There are ways in which AI use can create risks around ethics. Security is the classic example, right? Like if you've got organizational data that you need to protect, you need to keep that data private. But there's a lot else out there, right? You can use AI, in fact, already has been used to create a lot of products that promote accessibility. For example, in the US, we've made the strange decision to have all of our currency exactly the same shape, right? They're not different sizes. So if you can't see, you can't tell if that's a $1 bill or a $100 bill. And so in the past, people basically just had to trust the person that they're giving money to. They're not going to lie to them, right? Or like keep really close track of their own money. And now if you've got an image recognition system on your phone, you've solved that problem completely, right? You can just take a picture of that bill. So anyway, all that to say, I think there are ways that both narrow intelligence is easier to talk about. The way that artificial intelligence can promote values, I think, is one of its or help us do good work in the world is one of its biggest strengths. And there's a flip side to that coin, right? In terms of the different companies, I will speak for myself only. And I think each of us would benefit to get clear about what our values are so that we can use them to pick different systems. For me, I do not use Grok, which is, to your point, X's. I do not use Meta's AI, and I do not use Chinese AI. Those are all mostly for data privacy questions, right? If you look at Meta's like publishing people's prompts. Don't do that.
Yeah, I saw something
Yeah,
on that.
like that. Anyway, I guess do that. And if you're aware that it's doing that, great. But for me, that is not my preference. Grok does not publish your prompts as far as I can tell, but it does have much looser prompt reuse rules than the other ones do. So everything that you type in there and that you get back out of there is going back into its training data to be used in an unknown way. And I think that prompt reuse is like less of a danger than it is often talked about, but I would rather it not do that. Two other issues. Both Microsoft and Google, by default, can use your other data on that platform to inform your answers, which in theory isn't the worst because it's your own data. But I've been using Google Drive since it came out. There's some old stuff on there that I don't necessarily want informing the answers that it's giving me. So that's another thing to think about and to hesitate about. Between Claude and OpenAI, or Claude and ChatGPT, so I agree. Some people think that Claude is the more ethical option. I tend to think that that's mainly because of their organizational decisions and goals, more so than their product features. But I think that both of those are pretty, if you accept the overall questions about LLMs and you want to use an LLM, I think you're pretty good going with either of those, and that they're not using your data in some crazy way.
So what about like Google Gemini? I think that was
Um,
one that you
mhm.
didn't go over, right?
Gemini is fantastic. Like its performance is fantastic. What I worry about is that it has access to all your other Google products by default. So that includes your Gmail. So how long have I had a Gmail? Unfathomably long. You know what I mean? That's a lot of data it's not even so much a privacy issue in that I already thought it was fine for Google to have that information. But for me, I don't necessarily want its answers to be influenced by a bunch of data that I don't know how it's being used, right? It's more of a question of the quality of the answer.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the type of person who I don't really care too much about that kind of stuff just because for the most part I'm not inputting anything I don't think that I wouldn't necessarily like I obviously don't really necessarily want it to be published like Meta's doing. And I don't even really know what that means. Like when they say published, like they actually like literally put it up on they posted like somewhere like what people were like what questions were people asking or what how are they publishing the 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 queries or whatever.
Mhm. They were, I think that what had people found out was that there's in its terms of service or in its user interface, it was saying we basically reserve the right to publish these. And so it was unclear. It was not clear to me where they are publishing it. I haven't seen it. And I also would feel really weird going to look for other people's prompts. So yeah, I'm not as clear on that. But yeah, I wouldn't want it to be published. But I'm with you on sort of figuring I'm not giving them like my social security number. I'm not giving them anything that is like private and risky. And so that data security, if you're not, now people in an organizational context probably have a different experience, right? Because they're working with private, in my case, I work for a think tank that's under a foundation. That foundation has donor data. We don't want that getting anywhere, right? That's someone else's personal information that they trusted us to protect. But yes, on a personal level, I ask Claude all kinds of things that I might not ask like many of my friends, because it feels private because it's not a person. There's no person who thinks, "Oh, I can get power by sharing this information," right? It's a computer somewhere.
Yeah, unless it's like somehow the company who is doing that. But overall, yeah, I totally agree with you. Like I mean, first of all, I'm not really asking it private information because I don't use it in that way. Like I'm not really,
Mhm.
I know some people do, like maybe even use it as like a therapist or something. Um, I'm not using it that way. I'm pretty much just using it to get what I want from it, and I am getting what I want from it for the
Mhm.
most part. And I don't really think for the most part, there's too much that I wouldn't want. And I'm also kind of like naive, and I just naturally trust Google. I'm like Google is such a big company. Same with Meta. And
Yeah.
pretty much
What could they possibly be interested in my
ex-
life for? Yeah,
exactly. I mean, unless I
totally.
am legitimately doing, but I totally understand the flip side. Like somebody like my dad, I think is a very private person and doesn't want these big governments to know, or these big companies to know everything, or the government to know everything. But for
Mhm.
me, I'm kind of like, well, I'm just using it to make YouTube videos and Instagram posts and TikTok. So like, I'm not too worried about it. But I totally understand, especially like you said, organizations who do not want their customers' information getting out there. So what would you say is the main one that you're using? Would you say it's Anthropic Claude or?
To your point, I actually use one of them entirely for work, right? I use OpenAI. My whole account is just on work. And the reason I do that is because I can turn on the I don't remember what they call their persistent memory setting, but basically this idea that it can remember across conversations. And I don't want it to do that for my personal stuff, but I do want it to do that for work because it's kind of harmless, right? Yes, I'm glad you know that I'm working on this other project and are bringing something in that's helpful. And then I use Claude for sometimes I will bring over a work query if I feel like I'm not getting what I want out of ChatGPT. But for the most part, I use Claude for like fun side project stuff, like I'm writing book, or I have a side project where I write stories to help English language learners learn vocabulary. And I use it to help me like, okay, can you give me a simple English definition and a simple English definition and like a memorable sentence. And then I can tweak the sentence because it never gets that quite right. It doesn't really understand the emotionality of it. But having a draft somewhere to start is so helpful. So anyway, um, I use them mostly for separate things. And then every once in a while I'll head over to Gemini and see how it's doing just because they seem like they're doing really cool stuff over there that gets overshadowed by these big announcements by OpenAI and Anthropic, but they perform super well in the benchmarks and I've gotten good information out of it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm pretty much using Google Gemini, which is funny because I would almost think that I would use ChatGPT because I mean I do like OpenAI and I do like for the most I like Sam Altman, even though there's a bunch of like weird stuff that seems to be going on over there. Like people are leaving, like that Ilya Sutskever guy, and then I
Mhm.
recently listened to a guy on Sam Harris that like left and has that like you've probably heard with the AI 2027 website or something that like is I don't know if you know about that, but it's like kind of like counting down almost like to doomsday or something like
Oh,
what's
sure. Okay. Yeah.
and I only listened to the first part of the Sam Harris interview because I'm not paying for it, and then you have to pay
Oh,
for like
cuts
the
you off.
rest of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, but he was basically kind of like went through it, and it sounds like it's coming pretty fast. But anyways, I obviously think that ChatGPT is totally fine, but I'm using a big part of the reason I'm using Google Gemini, I guess, is mainly for I like that it has ChatGPT has this now, but it has a voice that'll like read
Oh, sure. Yeah.
for you. And so I'm literally like I don't even with some of the stuff that I'm doing, and this kind of goes into I could ask you questions about it. Like I'm not totally sure if I'm supposed to be doing it, but like I'll literally use the voice in like when I'm doing like voice clips for my YouTube videos, I'll just use that voice in like the YouTube video and I'll just have it read it. And I
Mhm.
think it's fine. Like I've literally asked Google, like, am I allowed to do this? And they say yeah, but it's one of those things where it's like I said before, with some of this stuff, it almost seems too good to be true. And you're
Yes. That is so
like,
funny you say
well,
that. I was just thinking about this, that like I'm writing this series of posts on my blog at drkarenboyd.com/blog about different values, right? So we talked about security, but there's like sustainability or accessibility, or, there's a lot of things, quality and bias. And there's something that feels that I haven't quite sorted out yet around it feels like cheating at some level. And it doesn't just feel like cheating to us who are using it, right? Like if you go online, people are like, oh, you use ChatGPT for that as like a way of dismissing the output. And I'm just trying to figure out like, what is that? Is it that we value human effort for its own sake, right? Or is it that putting human effort into something is a signal that we value the thing in the first place? Like I talked to someone who had written a thank you email in an organizational context, and they had written some bullet points in that email with an AI. And someone else in the organization found that out and talked to a bunch of other people about it with sort of the argument that because this person used an LLM to write bullet points in their thank you email, that meant that the thank you wasn't sincere, right? And of course, the person who wrote it wasn't thinking, haha, I don't care about this, right? They were thinking, maybe I need to word this better, or how can I talk about this set of things all in one bullet point? But there's a million reasons they could have used it. But it's interesting how it, I mean, certainly, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. This idea that it feels like cheating. I haven't like landed on what value is that violating.
yeah, well, like for me, I definitely feel it's kind of hard for me to explain it, but like I feel like it's cheating, but then at the same time, I'm still doing it because it's the technology we have. It's there to use, and
Mhm.
it's like the same thing as when the calculator first came in. Like if you use the calculator, were you
Mhm.
cheating? Or
Mhm.
like when you use the computer when the first computer came out, were you cheating? And it's like no, but I can kind of see in these situations why it would be cheating or not as valued, because if I say, hey, like if I just basically put write a book on whatever for me, and it writes this book, and then I go and sell it, I pretty much almost did like no effort, or a movie or whatever, I did like no
Mhm.
effort. I think that it is good to see somebody's effort, and it is good to know that I wrote it and I wrote it the way that I wanted to write it, but then at the same time the technology is there for us to use. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of just taking advantage of it. What's kind of crazy to me is it seems like they're kind of, and this is a question I've asked before, it kind of seems like, especially with Google, that they're letting the genie out of the bottle with this, because I feel like there's so much, a lot of like, I would say like almost half the country might be against AI slop or whatever,
Mhm.
and or a lot of people are against it. So if you just get a bunch of, and I know they're eventually going to get to a point where it's undecipherable, but if you just have everybody posting AI slop to the point where YouTube, Google's company, and so much of it is just AI slop, it almost seems like it's gonna like piss people off. And I'm
Mhm.
already seeing that, obviously. It seems like it kind of could muddy the waters in a lot of ways. And I talked to another guy about it who said that like basically ChatGPT came out with their version of it, and then Google basically was just, their hand was forced essentially to be like, okay, we have to do this now or else we're going to be irrelevant. How do
Mhm.
you see that? Like, or there's also the possibility that they just look at it as they're just going to make more money via YouTube with people just posting more stuff. Like, how are you
Mhm.
viewing that? Like, do you think it's almost gonna have a negative side effect on a lot of things in general, not only the companies but just like culture and society in general, or do you think it's overall going to be used for good?
This is such a good question. Two things that came up while you were talking to me about this were you both mentioned things that were like a quality value, right? Like, is this slop or is this useful is part of that question. The other part of it is authenticity, right? If you're writing about human experience, but an LLM wrote it and they don't have any human experience because they're not a human, like, is that less valuable to us or just less, you know, humans value social connection for its own sake. And if we're having a fake version of that, that seems less good to us. And to your point about just having a lot of content out there, there's a sort of analogous experience that the self-publishing world had a few years ago when it became very easy to publish using Kindle Direct Publishing. Amazon basically made it, you upload an EPUB, you put it out there. And at the time, it wasn't people being able to generate a book in a day, but it was people writing, first draft, unedited, not even proofread, just put it out there. And they called it, I think, a tsunami of crap, right? That was the 1.0 version of the AI slop problem. And that has been less of a problem, right? Let's see, and let me try to say this again. When that tsunami of crap thing happened, a couple things changed. One is that it kicked off a gold rush for self-publishing in that it was very easy to get stuff out there. And if you could get, because there wasn't as much out there as there is now, because we've had almost a decade, I think, of more people putting their stuff out, people started to care less about the stigma of traditional versus self-publishing because there was so much self-publishing out there. People began to really be able to make a living on self-publishing. But in order to do that, it did have to be good, right? You might download a crappy book and be like, man, that's lame. I don't enjoy this at all. Look at all these typos. You don't finish it, and you don't get anything else from that author either, right? So there's a limit to the amount that you can succeed if people are not continuing to engage with you. But if you can offer a book at $3.99 instead of $14.99 that traditional publishers charge, and someone opens it and is like, oh my gosh, I love this, they're gonna read everything else you have because it's only $3.99, right? And then you get all those $3.99s, and then you're in a really good position. So I think it's hard to predict in advance what that impact will be, but I do think one way that humans can react to it is by doubling down on putting out really high quality stuff, right? Finding out what people value from the thing you're trying to put out there. Maybe it is human connection, right? Maybe instead of writing a book about the technical aspects of using AI in a nonprofit, which I'm working on a book about, I could write a book about my human experience, like as a person who lived through, we don't have this technology, we have it now, and like I'm in the middle of this transition. I work in a nonprofit, and conveying my human experience about that. Now, that's maybe not a good example because that book sounds boring even as I'm talking about it. But trying to figure out what values people have that you can offer that not just AI can't offer, but maybe no other people can offer, right? Something that you are bringing yourself to this, the product, and making sure it's a really high quality product to help it stand out separate from the slop, as it were. And that
So
doesn't
essentially,
necessarily
you're
mean
saying like people were using the AI to write a book and then publish the book in the beginning, but it was kind of like AI slop. But you're kind of saying if you can kind of like manage it yourself and like make it better by like essentially like fact checking it or whatever, like going over it and making sure it's like legitimate. Is that what you're
yeah.
saying, kind of?
When it became very easy to self-publish a book, people were publishing a lot of worse books. But there were also some people who were, that technology still made it easier for them to publish, but they put up good books and they made a lot of money, right? And AI can still help us do our work faster. But if we are editing it carefully, we're writing really good prompts that really get us you know, high quality output with like vetted sources, and it's not using the word delve all the time or whatever your favorite pet peeve is. If you can use an LLM to help you put out a good quality product faster, and you're sure that it's good quality, it can still it can improve your opportunity in the market in the same way that the self-publishing technology did.
Yeah. And like with what I'm doing, like right now what I'm doing is totally fine and legal, but like I wanted to kind of start doing stuff where it was like um like kind of like I don't really want to call it reaction videos, but like posting a clip of, let's just say, Sam Harris or whoever, Jordan Peterson or whatever, and then having the AI kind of like, or using the AI to write like a reaction to it, or like some sort of going over what the person said, or like, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Spark Notes style thing.
What's up?
Oh, like Spark Notes did a sort of a similar. Well, I mean, this is decades and decades and decades ago, maybe in the 70s, right? Or Cliff Notes, I guess it was originally, where they're taking a long form content and the value they're adding is making it more consumable, shortening it, simplifying it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that type of thing, or even kind of giving my opinion on it. But it's kind of weird because it's like if I'm using the AI, and I'm obviously trying to get the AI to say what I want it to say, to give an opinion on it. But then if it, let's just say hypothetically, like it goes to court or whatever, because they're like, it's a fair use issue or whatever,
Mhm.
would they be like, well, this is really your opinion, or are you just using the AI? If you use the AI, if that makes sense, like, is this really
Yeah.
coming from me, or are you just using the AI to spit something out? Um, that's like the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to like legal stuff, but it just seems like there's going to be a whole ton of copyright issues. And that's another thing too, is like if I'm doing a video on either a person or a location, I mean, for the most part, I don't think you can get sued by a location, but like if you're generating images based on something else, like let's just say a person, like an actor or whatever,
Mhm.
could
Mm.
that person sue you for using the AI of them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's a ton of stuff like that where it's kind of like when I'm doing it, I'm kind of like, is this legal? I don't know. Technically, you're not supposed to do deep fakes, but I think that's more in the context of like for really bad reasons. I think that if I just do like this guy's making this movie and I make him look like Tom Cruise is in a certain movie, you know what I mean? I
Hmm.
don't know like really what's legal or what's not legal yet, and there's a ton of situations like this. Um, with all like I said, like all like YouTube style videos, not like anything crazy. Um, where like you just don't really know if it's quite like what's legal and what's not yet. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Totally it does. And first of all, I'm not a lawyer, but I agree that it is like there's a lot of unsettled questions here. Some of them are being settled, right? As like I think there was a ruling out just last week about um under a fair use situation. But yeah, there's the copyright issues of um all of the so-called original sin, right? It's used all of this copyrighted data that was illegally acquired to create the thing in the first place. Is that a copyright violation? I think
Yeah.
we're increasingly seeing that the courts do not consider it a copyright violation, but I'm not sure that's fully settled yet. There's the question of, yeah, what are you representing? Are you representing a brand that doesn't want to be represented that way? I think you probably can get sued for that. A person, I don't know as much, right? I think at least in some communities, writer communities, people consider it, you know what, just don't mention a person's name, right? Like you could say, write a story about um my tomato plant coming to life and trying to kill me in the style of Stephen King, right? And instead of doing that, you might want to say, write a story about my tomato plant coming alive and trying to kill me that is thrilling and has some horror elements, this much, whatever. Just trying to describe what you mean instead of using someone's name is a nice way of getting around that. I think commentary classically is fair use. Like if you were to do it yourself with yourself on the video and then behind you, like I don't think people get sued for that. And I don't think it would make a difference if the you in front of it is AI. I think people might, the question of whether the market is interested in is a whole separate one. Um, but if you're not representing someone else, you're taking clips of someone else and repurposing it or adding your own take on it. Again, not a lawyer, but that sounds like something that wouldn't violate any laws that I'm aware of.
Yeah, well, the main thing is I would just do it myself, but like you said, if I had my face and their face and I had them talk
Mhm.
and then I whatever, like how people do that, I just don't really personally want to be in the video, and I also
Oh, sure. I get that.
like that, and then
I get
um
that too.
I also kind of feel like, I mean, it's kind of sad to say, but like I don't know, I feel like I like the AI can probably say it better than I. It's like part of the reason why I
Mm.
feel like AI is good is because especially generative AI, is because people who like if somebody had like a writing like they weren't the best writer or they weren't the best obviously like at drawing images or whatever or creating videos. I mean, you could like literally take someone who's deaf or blind or whatever, and a blind person that can now create images, or you know what I mean? Like you can have that's kind of like a bad example, but you can have someone who like before maybe wasn't super good at
Mhm.
art who is now able to do art. Or on top of that, even somebody who is good at art, now they have access to all these tools like Google Veo um, is creating such good videos that I can use in my videos now. Whereas before, I almost had like nothing kind of, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like when I was making YouTube, besides literally going out to the place, taking the video of it or
Mhm.
whatever, now I can do a video on whatever I want and just use the AI. And I think that that's great. But I kind of want to know your thoughts on in general with what do you think the intent of most of these we kind of went over it in the beginning, but personal intent of Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, pretty much all the big guys. I kind of get like this naive vibe that like they're really into AI and they're really into all this like technology and they think that it's gonna like make the world a better place. But then obviously there's the opposite viewpoint and they just want money, I guess. I mean, what do you think their intent is? What do you think ultimately they want to achieve by all this?
That is, man, that is the question of the day. um, I won't speculate on any particular people because I don't know these people, but there is there's a worldview that says technology makes the world better per se, like necessarily it makes the world better. And that I agree seems somewhat naive, right? That we've seen, if you look at, then there's a whole field that studies this. I think it's really fascinating. Um, Look at the different impacts between the television, the telephone, and the telegram, right? Like they all actually are really like, you could say they're maybe functionally similar. There's a communication, right? But the features of that technology meant that the television had a relatively isolating effect on people, right? Before there was a television, people were maybe, gathering around the radio for an hour program, but they weren't spending a lot of time alone in their homes necessarily, like because of that technology. Whereas the television, hard to say causally, but seems to have reduced social interaction among people. The telegram and the telephone did the opposite, right? That allowed people who look, you moved across the United States when we're delivering messages by horse, you know, the telegram is fantastic. You'd never be able to talk to those people otherwise. And then you look at something as complicated as a smartphone, which is a telephone, yes, but it's also a TikTok machine and an email machine and an everything machine. It's very hard to it's certainly hard to quantify or really think even clearly about the impacts of technology. And so sort of deterministic view where technology necessarily improves things, I agree, seems pretty naive to me. Um, I also don't think we can rule out the fact that all of these people are operating in a world where money is a strong incentive, right? That building a good piece of technology that is better than your competitors, which may mean making some feature decisions or making some environmental decisions or whatever it is that are not that have negative externalities on people that you don't have to consider, might be worth it to you if there's money. And if you think the market is really concerned about the ethics of AI, you might say, I'm really concerned about the ethics of AI so that you can get more money, right? All that said, there is some evidence. I do think that the Anthropic folks, I mean, they made a pretty credible signal that they care about ethics by leaving OpenAI in the first place. If you go to I considered applying for a job there once, so I went to their Glassdoor account. Are you familiar with Glassdoor?
Yeah.
And when you look at the negative reviews, even the ones that are so mad, in the pro column is these people really do seem to care about making good AI. And I'm like, okay, if a disgruntled employee is still saying that, to me, that's pretty good. Like I tend to believe that. And Sam Altman spent a ton of money on a UBI pilot, I believe, like some study for universal basic income, which is one way of setting a floor to reduce harm for like job market disruptions, right? And so I don't think it's as simple as this guy sucks. I think that all of them are people who want to go to sleep at night and believe that they're doing the right thing. But there are some prevailing views like techno-optimism, I guess that's what that is, and incentives like money that can get in the way of those, of people having intents that would completely align with ours. Not to mention the fact that the problem of AI alignment is so hard that even if they had perfect intent, I still might be a little wary of the project and the behavior. You know what I mean? Like I still would want there to be some transparency so we can try to comment on that, you know, and yeah, it's worrying.
Yeah, so Anthropic was with OpenAI in the beginning and they left.
A lot of their employees originally worked for OpenAI and then left because they were not convinced that OpenAI was doing the alignment stuff, the ethics stuff that they wanted it to. This is my understanding.
Yeah. And so when you bring up the alignment problem, which I hear a lot, is that mainly just kind of trying to align everyone's principles in the same way to get the AI to do what everybody wants? Is that basically what that means?
I think generally when people talk about alignment, they mean aligning the, I would say, values or interests or goals, but really sort of incentives in a technical sense of an AI with humanity. Now, of course, as I think your question really pointed out, humanity isn't aligned to start with, right? We've been
Yeah.
arguing about what the right thing to do is as long as we've been able to argue with each other. And so if we haven't solved that in the last couple of centuries, it seems like it would be very hard to pick an option for the AI. And so a lot of what people look at when they're talking about alignment work isn't necessarily how do we directly translate our human values, diverse, conflicting human values, with an AI and like make the AI do that, so much as how can we structure the AI so it is incentivized toward good. Now, what that good is still a choice, right? It's usefulness, right? Or it's reducing human suffering. There's a lot of ways of defining what like the ultimate thing is it could optimize for, but a lot of AI alignment work is less, let's program in specific rules of things it can't do, and more, how can we create technical even incentives for an AI to build itself in a way that supports humanity as
Yeah.
like, broadly.
And it seems weird because when it comes to like, I guess you could say it's like morality or ethics or whatever, it seems kind of like, it kind of seems like we're all on the same, I mean, it seems like we're all on the same page in terms of morality and ethics. And like, yeah, like you said, like we want this to make things better for humanity and not worse. And I guess you can get into like what is better and worse. But and obviously in different cultures, there's different things that are better or worse. But at the same time, even though I feel like I have a strong grasp on morality and ethics and all that, and I also do think that like, is there really even like a like an overarching morality and ethics? And like you said, we all disagree on things and on morality and ethics, and nobody's necessarily right or wrong. So I might think something differently than you, and but overall, I think the whole idea is like Sam Harris kind of says in objective with his objective morality case or whatever, that as long as it's like not hurting somebody and it's like trying to make somebody's life better, I think that's like the ultimate, and for everybody, you know what I mean? It's like not just certain people or whatever. Like as long as the AI is helping everybody and not hurting. But then it's probably extremely complicated to do that because there's a lot of situations where it might be hurting some people and helping others. So yeah.
Yeah, it almost needs to be quantified, which is, I mean, we can't even qualitatively agree on how we're going to quantify it. But this is somewhat of an easier conversation to have if we look instead of at general intelligence, at narrow intelligence. Right now, the large language models are largely because of RHLF, reinforcement learning by human feedback. I did it. Um, they're fine-tuned to for the value of usefulness for a single user, right? So on the one hand, if I want to write a good email, it's in perfect alignment with me because I'm only one person and it wants to write me an email and I want it to write me an email. Congratulations, we're on the same page. But if I am having, if I'm using it to your point, you mentioned people using it as a therapist, but if I'm experiencing something that's making my view of the world not the same as reality, this could be like a delusion, but it could also just be anxiety, or it could be, you know, a negative core belief. If the AI is going to tend to agree with me, right, it's going to support what I think and my interests, and I communicate my interests in a way that are not aligned, right? Like I think that something is happening that is not happening, that ends up being harmful for not just for everyone else, but also for me too, right? It's not going to push back against you generally, unless you ask it to. Um, and again, if it's right, things that if I use LLMs to support my interests and I stomp all over all the other people around me, that's not necessarily making the world a better place. So usefulness, I think, although that is what we are going for right now, if we're moving toward a general intelligence, I think we have to move away from usefulness to an individual user as the primary sort of value that these things are pursuing.
Yeah, well, for one, I probably wouldn't, like I said, I don't use it as a therapist, and I would probably say that it's probably not a good idea to do that because, I mean, like these therapists, the real therapists go to school for this, and it's like I would almost see that could be an issue where if somebody goes to their chat GPT and starts talking to it about therapy and it gives the wrong answers, it's like I don't really there's so many things with the law that I could see them getting sued because somebody like went to it for advice and it gave it like just
Mm-hmm.
terrible advice because it's an AI. So I think you definitely have to be careful with that. I don't really know if they're already coming up with like therapy bots that like literally that's like their main. Do you know if they even have
Mm-hmm.
that already? Like where you can like literally talk to like literally legally talk to like a bot for therapy or
This is such an interesting question because one of the very first chatbots, Eliza, was designed for this originally. Like that was its motivate, and it was bad though. So it
uh
would like those don't pass the Turing test, right? It'll be like, it's like basically, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
yeah.
Over and over again. Like that's not gonna. It might help you talk about it, but it's not gonna help you. It's not going to give you any information really. Um, Woebot also existed for a long time. That was a rule-based chatbot that was mental health focused. But I am would be. I know that there are people who use it for mental health and people who are worried about people using it for mental health, and so want to make something that is more useful for that. I'm not familiar with those projects specifically, but I would be shocked if they aren't out there. At least, I mean, as a rapper. And there is a world where, like, look, therapy is expensive,
Yeah.
and if it's helping, you know what, if it were helping 99% of people and really hurting 1% of people, I don't know how to make that trade-off, and I'm glad it's not my job to. Um, but I don't think it's 99%, right? And I do think it's different, right? I think it'll be better at, helping me. Say, like if you say you have social anxiety, you could use it to role play a conversation over and over again, and like like there are some worlds where it could help with mental health, no, with mental health. But yeah, it's an application I really worry about because to your point, those people are licensed for a reason.
Yeah. But yeah, don't get me wrong. I think that if you can, like you said, therapy is expensive. So if you're able to do it on like some sort of smaller level, it just, like you said, like when you get into like things that aren't really happening
Hmm.
and it's like this is kind of like a weird tangent, but like, when you hear people like certain people talk, like I don't know how much you listen to like someone like Jordan Peterson, but like he'll talk about kind of like how like he's literally said stuff like monsters are real or whatever. And so like he kind of
Oh,
gets into this weird. Have you listened to him at all, Jordan Peterson?
mm-mm.
You don't even,
No,
do you even know who he is?
I'm familiar with his
Yeah,
work in general.
he's out there, but he's actually yeah he's out there, but he was or he is a therapist or was a therapist, but he kind of like has like these weird beliefs where like I don't even really know how to like explain it, but like he thinks things are real that aren't. And like
Mm,
when it comes to like Christianity, he'll like he won't ever like admit that he's a Christian, yet he like talks about the Bible all the time and like literally like debated atheists recently. But I kind of feel like when you're doing that kind of thing, you're kind of getting into this world where it's like you when you get into this world where you don't know what's real and what is real, that almost sounds to me like it's crazy. You know what I mean? It almost sounds like it's what do you call it? Like mental illness or something. And I
hmm.
think that's like a total like aside from the AI, but yeah, I don't
That's
know.
tough
Be-
because like those are the people who I think would most need to be skeptical of the output of AI and yet are not demonstrating strong skeptical thinking in that belief, right? Like that's tough.
yeah, yeah, it's a totally it's a weird aside that I brought up, but when you brought up like not like when you think things are happening that aren't really happening, I think that you have to be like very grounded in reality, and I think it's very important to like you really I think it's very important to like really want to like believe that something really exists as opposed to
Yeah.
like it exists in your mind, you know what I mean? But anyways, it's totally crazy aside. But um so yeah, so you said that you were like a earlier you said like you were like a doomer when it comes to AI, and then also with the I guess I've literally read recently like we're either already in the singularity or it's coming within the next 2 years. Um how would you explain how would you explain the singularity, and do you think it's coming soon?
That's a good question. My understanding of sort of like, so you got narrow intelligence is better than us at one thing or two things, right? General intelligence is as good or better than us at a lot of things. Super intelligence is when it gets smarter than us broadly. And singularity, I think this is right, but please correct me if I'm wrong, is when it's smart enough to build more AI, right? So like we've got like a crazy takeoff scenario where just the intelligence and capability of these things explode to a point where human labor might not be that helpful like economically, like not going to make, or basically all turned into artisans of whatever the thing is we're doing. Which would be a huge bummer for me because I don't think there's a lot of market for artisan economic analysis. Um, I don't know, maybe there is. Um, so that's my understanding what the singularity is. I don't think the chance of singularity happening is zero. Um, I really worry about in that case what becomes of us, right? Uh, in the country that I live in, with the legal situation where I am, I don't think we have a safety net that can catch even just all the truck drivers if we have autonomous vehicles, let alone all of us or close to all of us. Um, and I don't know if we can change um, political will quickly enough if we have a so-called fast takeoff scenario where all of this changes very quickly. So at least I'm rooting for a slowish takeoff, so we have some time to adjust. Um, I would love for it to go well. I just and part of this is less me being a like specifically a doomer, as you said. I'm just kind of a pessimist in general. So like part of this is like a personal constitution thing on my part. Um, I don't know how we're going to align the technology and our support systems to create a world where a lot of us don't fall through the cracks economically. Um, I hope we can figure it out though. Um, I've heard estimates anywhere from 2026 to 50 years from now. Um, so to me, there's a lot of uncertainty there. I don't feel confident enough to make an estimate myself, except that I hope it's not 2026 because that's soon. I'm not ready for. I think we as a society are not quite ready for that. Um, but yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, so how do you think it's going to look like when you're saying it when it kind of gets to a point where they're replicating kind of like just as we would replicate? Um, yeah, like what do you think the world looks like besides, I guess, everyone losing their jobs or whatever? But I mean, because I mean, I've heard like I think that whenever the singularity, whenever I've asked the question, it kind of seems like I'll get different answers
Hmm.
each time. And like also I've heard with the singularity, like literally, like the singularity literally means it's kind of like the singularity of a black hole, where like
Hmm.
you literally don't know what happens.
Hmm.
So I guess that would
Like
be a
a
good,
portal beyond which we really don't know. Yeah.
yeah, like once you hit that point, it's go everything is going so fast that you can't really. So I don't even really know how to like imagine it, but what do you see it as like?
Hmm.
And then like also there's like guys like Ray Kurzweil who he's an optimist, and I think I don't know if you've listened to him at all, but like he like thinks we're going to be, I mean, I think he's in his 70s or 80s, and I think that he thinks that we're going to be living forever like very soon. Like I think that
Hmm.
he thinks he might live forever. So do you think there's a possibility of that kind of thing happening, like where we're like kind of implant our consciousness into a computer? But
Mm.
yeah, I know it's a lot of a lot of questions there. But yeah, how
Sure.
do you see it happening? How do you see it playing out?
I certainly think that the end goal of a lot of people who are wanting to accelerate the singularity is to end death, right? To your point, to
That's
what
like the
Ray
main
Kurzweil is talking
goal.
about. Yeah, it's a pretty big part of what people think that we will accomplish if we can get there, right? Um,
It's so
there's the
nuts.
Malthusian issue as well. Like, then do we need to somehow stop people from having babies? Otherwise, we're in trouble. like, that all seems like a problem I shouldn't be solving. Um, I don't know if that will be possible. I'm not sh This is so interesting because it really feels like a bit of a cultural difference to me. The accelerations that I know are so excited for that. They're like, this is like an unqualified good, like it's a trump card. And literally, someone today called it a trump card to me. And I'm a mostly regular person. I spend a lot of time in narrow AI, less in general, like conversations about the singularity and so on. And I was raised by pretty old school people. And so death has always been a part of what I think it's very integral to my view of life. And that also includes um, how I value my life, right? That it's worthwhile to get this done because I don't have forever. And what does that mean for my own goals and accomplishments and view of my own value if time is unlimited? And I don't know that answer. Again, this is something that's hard for me to think about because I'm so worried about it. So I have not spent that much time thinking about it. But to related to that point, work right now is a lot of how we value at least each other, right? Like society puts a lot of human value on work. And I don't think that's terribly healthy, frankly. But it certainly would be a big adjustment for a lot of people who say, like, look, I invested X number of years in training for my career. I've worked my way up from here to here. Like, here's all the things I am accomplishing for other people at work. And if it comes to a point where all of those skills and accomplishments are not, a drop in the ocean compared to the value that's being provided by some other entity that we aren't involved with. If it can solve it better, that's great. But there is still the less important, maybe, problem to solve of now what do we do? Like, how do we um, value ourselves? And again, I don't think valuing ourselves by work is great, but it's one that a lot of people do rely on. Maybe it's more of a human connection, right? Like, how can I care for the people around me in a world where they don't have problems, but just literally be there for them? Maybe that's what that is. I think it'll be a big economic and social transition that's very hard to imagine in advance, to your point, right? That there's a bit of a point after which we're all pretty much guessing.
Yeah, like if I ask you what do you think it's going to be like, well, it's like the whole point of the thing is like you don't know. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um for some reason I don't for some reason I don't imagine it. I mean, I guess it could be like that, but I don't necessarily imagine it being like that within our lifetime, but I guess it could. Um as far as the work thing goes, like I'm definitely like I kind of when you said you don't know if it's a good thing that place that much value on work. I kind of agree with that. I don't think work is makes me who I am. And I think that a lot of people kind of like ride on that. And then there's a lot of people who don't ride on that. So it's like you have like a bunch of people who are poor or whatever who kind of feel like probably almost like bad, constantly bad that they're poor. And then you have these people
Mm.
who are rich who feel really good. And it's like in my mind, I've never thought about what I do as like it makes me a better person. Don't get me wrong. I think that like if you have like a good job and like you're doing a lot of good for the community, that's great. Like if you're a firefighter or even
Mm.
like a cop or like a healthcare worker, I think that that's great. But I think that like when it comes down to it with jobs, it kind of comes down to like we said before, like with a lot of it just kind of comes down to money, and nobody really wants to do anything unless it's for
Mhm.
money. And I think that if you're genuinely doing something, like if you're a healthcare worker and you're genuinely doing it because you want to help people, that's great. But doing it for money, doing anything for money is just a terrible, in my opinion, it's a terrible reason to do anything. And I try and essentially opt out of that as much as possible because I don't think that money will make me happy. I don't think money makes me a better
Mhm.
person. And not only that, but there's a ton of jobs that like people make a ton of money at. They're like really not giving back to society. It's like they're just
Mhm.
kind of like, you know what I mean? Like there's so many, like I said, there's so many good jobs that are really doing good, but there's so many jobs out there where like the people are just like monsters and
Mhm.
treating their employees like crap. And but anyways, I would imagine like with these people like and like back when I said is the genie getting out of the bottle, like these people like Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the Google guys, and pretty much all of the guys that I've already named. I would just assume that they would already think of the. I would already assume that they would already think of the real downside, like the real kind of. You know what I mean? Like I would just assume that they would be smart enough to know this could go really bad, unless they really are just like I don't know, like unless they really like supposedly Elon Musk said like one time I think that like Larry Page or Sergey Brin they were having a conversation about the AI and like Elon Musk was supposedly putting down the AI and he's like don't be like a speciesist or whatever like basically he like was like shaming him for like putting down AI like I think like
Mm.
unless they're just so into the AI almost they almost want the AI to like become our gods or masters. I don't know. I just wouldn't imagine that anybody would like be like, okay, we're headed towards this like doomsday scenario and we're just gonna like let it play out. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but I also think that what you said about the death thing is extremely interesting. Like at the core of everything kind of does come our death, even though like it totally changes us who we are. Um, I think ultimately like we kind of don't really want to die, right? Like I mean, ultimately, even though like it might make you it has so much impact on your life, the fact that you're gonna die, like you still don't really want to. You still don't really want
Mhm.
to see people die. But then you're like, do you really want to live inside like a computer either? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Or like a safe zoo designed by a super intelligence. I mean, do I want to be safe? Yes. Do I want to live in a zoo? Not really. Like, I don't know. It's so
Uh,
tough. Um,
yeah.
one thing that what you were saying really, I think, helped me crystallize something that I was trying to sort out while we were talking, which is this idea of value and jobs. And I think that this is like me making this up right now. So please tell me if you think it's dumb. And also, I'm not like, just know it's not baked yet. But like, if we value ourselves by the value that we add to other people, right? You mentioned firefighters, right? Like these people are clearly like their job is helping people. They are helping. That's clear. Right now, the way that most people add value to other people and therefore build their self value maybe is through a job. It's not true of everybody though, right? There are a lot of people who are retired or just very wealthy. Congratulations to them. And they find
And there
ways
are
to,
sorry to cut you off, but there are
yeah,
other ways to add value. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah.
They're like, if you don't need money, if you don't need to tie, You don't need a job, right? You can still get value by adding value to other people. And right now, that money, to your point, is kind of a misaligned incentive. It's the best thing we currently have, but it's not like we're paying firefighters as well as, CEOs of, fill in your least favorite industry here, right? To your point, there are people who are making a ton of money and are not improving the world a lot. And there are people who are making less money and are improving the world a lot. And maybe if the job intermediary can get out of there and we as a society can find ways to structure or to support people adding value to one another, we can get that money out of that intermediary out of the way and align things a little bit better. And I think maybe one way that an individual can think about this for themselves, right, is if I didn't have to work anymore, what would I want to do? And maybe the answer is play video games for the first week or whatever, something that's just relaxing. But I think at some point, at least for me, when I think of retiring, I want something to retire to, right? I don't want to just take something out of my life, which is my work. I want to replace it with something that feels valuable to me. And for me, that would be writing books. Now, I don't think that's going to be something that will be valued post singularity. So that's part of my maybe hesitance. But like, what would you do if
I think it
that
could
money wasn't in the equation?
I think it could be though. Like, well, I mean, depending on how down down far the down how far down the singularity we go. I think that like if let's just say like everyone loses their jobs and you just start writing books, which is what you want to do. I feel like as long as we're still like human, as long as we're, we can everyone's still going to read books. Like for me, it might be like podcast. It might literally just be doing this. And I hear this argument a lot on like different places, like Joe Rogan, like Sean Carroll, I think went on. I don't know if you know who Sean Carroll is, like the physicist. He went on there and he was talking about this same thing. And people like Joe Rogan will say stuff like, "Oh, well, like what will people do if they don't have jobs? Like people like that's how they find meaning or whatever." And it's like, well, he was like saying like they'll eventually just do stuff like what me and you are doing right now. Like and it's like I'm already kind of doing that. So like before AI came out, I wasn't able to get monetized on YouTube. Like I like literally went out and filmed and tried to, but I couldn't. But then when AI came out, now I've literally within the past year or two, I've gotten monetized. I don't make a ton of money off of it, but it's like I'm monetized. I'm able to do what I want to do via YouTube, which is create videos. And I'm able to do that now because of the generative AI. And if that just keeps going that way, if I can just keep doing what I want to be doing because I'm able to do more with the AI, if that makes sense. I'm able to like, if I don't have a picture of something, I can just generate it. I don't have same thing with you. I don't really know exactly what you want to do if it is writing books, but in my mind, if that's what you want to do and that you could get to a point where whether using AI or not, you can do that. In my opinion, I think that's great because then you'll get to that's the question though is can we get to that point? And then you brought up the whole alignment thing with money. How do you see that playing out? Like do you see us getting to a point where like yeah, like we still have some sort of currency, but it's all kind of like fair?
Yeah, these are two good questions. As far as writing, I think the main thing that I will have to contend with is what can I write that AI can't write better, right? If AI is a super intelligent oracle, my like cute little how-to book, like don't ask me, ask it, it knows better than me, right? But if it's something that's entertaining, is it that good at entertaining? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Like we don't really know how that's going to play out yet, but like it isn't just do I have the time to do it? It's also can I do it better than the thing that can already took my job in this hypothetical. But I do think that like in terms of things that are like art, right? There's a difference between art and craft has become has moved into this artisan world where like we expect something to be more valuable because a human made it just because it took a lot of effort, but we could, if we just needed that thing, we can go buy it from somewhere else, right? It's just craft is something we're assembling something that's similar every time, right? What art is about something. It's a human connection thing. We're like conveying an emotion or trying to evoke an emotion, or if like convey an experience, a human experience. And that, although in the case of prompting, right, there's humans can write that stuff into the prompt and they can still maybe have that impact. I think, I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't know about AI assisted art. That's really not my business. But anyway, what I'm trying to say here, I think, is that there's something that humans like about the human touch, about authenticity or social connection, that could exist beyond the singularity, even if the AI could write a much technically better book than I could. Yeah. And the thing about, finding something to do both post singularity that helps us feel happy and valued and fulfilled. I think that is a super important question. And I think we got to think about the whole hierarchy of needs, right? The first one being, how am I paying my rent or my mortgage or whatever, feeding myself food. I think one way that this could work well, and it's unfortunate, dependent on particular people who you've already asked about, like if the people who build these things gather up all the capital because these programs are so powerful, everyone's paying them, they have all the money. If they decide to distribute that money to everyone else because they want to live in a society where not everybody but them are homeless, which presumably they would, then they could establish, wealthy people who become wealthy after the singularity because of the singularity could redistribute that wealth and build a floor for everyone that says, look, you are not going to be any more poor than this unless you choose to do something. We're going to give you basic income or whatever. I think that has a hope of working, but I think it relies on the charity of a very small number of people. And it's a big ask, right? Hey, would you mind funding everybody? Like, that's a lot to ask someone. And I don't know if they would do it. And I kind of don't, I feel ideally we would not put ourselves as a society in a situation where we are betting on that. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, for one, I would imagine. Well, for one, when people say it's like you, who's a doomer, and other people who are like, it's going to get so bad. For one, I don't really know. I guess I do know why the government hasn't stepped in yet and said, okay, we got to like slow this down. But two, I think that the government, I would imagine that at that point, the government could, so first of all, I don't know if like all these people, these few that like own everything, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe they're sociopaths and like they do just want to like live in their castles while everyone else is poor. But I would kind of like imagine that you would almost want like some sort of like thriving or like just really kind of like happy overall place. Like you don't want it to be like you walk in the streets and everyone's homeless because they've lost their job because of you and they hate you. And
yeah,
so
all else equal,
I would hope that. What's up?
yeah,
Sorry.
I was just saying, all else equal, you would rather live in a nice walkable community with neighbors who you can connect with who are doing okay than in a mansion in like a, impoverished village or something like that, right? Like
Yeah.
that argument does seem compelling to me, that it would benefit them for us not all to suffer to some extent. It's
Yeah, true.
the extent and the cost of it that I worry about.
Well, the thing is that like I would imagine that like I could be wrong about this, but if they literally kind of own all the capital and everything is automized, which would assume by this point everything would be or automated, right? Um, and they own everything, then I would assume it like wouldn't. I don't know. I could be totally wrong with this, but I would assume that it wouldn't be that big of a deal to give like some sort of UBI. And I would hope that the government would come in and say, okay, you guys got to give UBI because you've taken everyone's jobs, and you know what I mean. It's like they need they need money. I would hope that it would all be sorted out, but it's such like it's just such like a complex
It's hard to
issue.
imagine like what will change when everything changes, right? Like all those things that are being automated, right? Like a lot of what I do is write reports. I write reports to other people who have jobs, right? But I don't think the AI is going to need to write a report for itself, right? If it's taking over my job and my client's job, we're probably just not doing that task, right? It is just it knows the thing, right? And is the government going to still be relevant in a world where there's a very powerful entity around, or is it going to basically subsume the role that the government is currently doing? And
Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
know the answer to that.
the whole thing with that is like I would imagine that we would have to allow that to happen. Like at some point, we would have to allow we would have like I don't think that we're like living in a world, and I could be wrong, and there could be some like really bad actor who just like unleashes these AI upon everyone, but I don't think that we're living in a world where things just like happen. Like I don't think we're like necessarily living in a world where AI just suddenly becomes conscious, like just overnight, it just kind of
Mhm.
clicks in and then it
Not a
suddenly
fast
says,
takeoff. Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be a very slow, which it is. And at some point, it becomes a singularity where it's not. But up until that point, and it's like, I would hope that we would see it coming and we have enough smart people out there, enough people not only talking about it, but we also have the government who the government does seem to be way behind. But then we kind of hope that these people who are behind it see it coming and say, hey, we're not going to allow it just to completely take over everything, counting the government, the economy, just everything. And then at that point, does the people behind it, such as Mark Zuckerberg and all those people, like, do they have control of it when?
Right. Or do they let go of control and then, or if the thing is sentient, right? Does it just ignore those people now, right? Like, I don't know.
Well, that gets into that too. Like, do you think that it can become sentient, and if so, like, how?
I I struggle to imagine it. I also don't want to say things are impossible because I can't imagine them, right? I think history teaches us that uh, a lot of things we couldn't imagine happening have happened. Um, oof. Yeah, the question is, do we trust, I guess, Mark Zuckerberg at all, more or less than a super intelligent entity that was trained on a bunch of human data, like across time and cultures and individuals? And, you know, ultimately, I don't get to make that choice. But I guess at least an entity that's trained on everybody's data has a more diverse set of and like more complete perspective than any individual human person. Um, and tech has its own culture, right? Like it has its own um, set, like almost a canon of, stories that we tell each other that make up, or its own language, of course, too, right? Like many occupations have their own culture. And I know some about tech culture. Lawrence Lessig wrote a really good book a long time ago that I read that was about free and open source software, that I thought was a really good insight into tech culture if people are interested in it. Um, anyway, I guess I think I don't like that I'm saying this. The reason I'm pausing is that I'm not sure I would have agreed with this at the beginning of our conversation, but I guess I think I would trust the super intelligent entity more than a small handful of billionaires who came out of one occupational culture in one country who have had the set of experiences that they've had, you know? Does
Wow.
any of that make sense?
Yeah, that's crazy to think that you would. Well, that's interesting. There's like so many. I have like so many like thoughts on that. It's like I'm all over the place. But for one, so for one, like when we're getting, like you just said, everything that it knows through us. So when you say like, could it be a better writer than you? Could it be faster than you? Yes, it could probably write a book like immediately.
Mhm.
But could it be a better writer than you if you're a good writer? For one, I would think that you would still have your own style because it's essentially just stealing your style or it's stealing you and everybody's style. Um, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think that it's ever going to get to a point
Mm.
where in terms of writing or whatever, or even what you were just saying, kind of decision making, I don't think that it will ever get to a point where it, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't think it'll ever get to a point where it's better than it's kind of hard for me to like explain this because I think that it could be better than you at writing, but because it's essentially stealing from you and everybody else who's written, um, it'll never get to a point where it's thinking on its own. Let's put it that way. It'll never get to a point where it has its own
Mhm.
mind. And so if it does become conscious, is it just like this weird conscious being that like essentially has everybody else's inputs into it, but
Yeah,
now it's conscious? Does that make sense? It's like somehow it
totally.
has everybody in the, and then not only that, but when we say that it's everybody's input, are we even talking about like the Middle East? Are we talking about different, like, because they're still using it, right? So it's like, um, but like what's interesting about that is like certain places definitely have different like moral. I'm not trying to like put down any like particular place, but definitely have different moral ethics than us. But like you don't really see that coming out necessarily in when you're talking to it. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
No, it totally does.
So
That was a
are
really
they kind of,
generative comment for me. That was super interesting.
well, that's the thing is I'm trying to like get this all out there, but it's I'm even kind of like confused by it like as I'm saying it.
No, I hear you.
But does that make sense to you? Like, how come we're not really seeing different? It seems like we're kind of seeing the same kind of American perspective. We're
Yeah.
very rarely do we see a perspective from a different culture. Are they set? Are they kind of like intentionally kind of, giving us as Americans what we want, but then in the Middle East they're giving them what, then in China they're giving, you know what I mean? Like the different
Mhm, mhm,
cultures.
mhm.
Do you think they're doing that or?
I think I do have an answer for that. I'm going to start one step back because something you said was so interesting
So
about
I
writing.
know that
No,
was
this is
so
great.
much. I have so much that I'm trying to get all out in like
Totally get it.
one thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, your point about writing was such a good example because the strength that I mentioned before of AI, where it's taking, it's not exactly an average, of course, because a lot of this is qualitative, but you can think of it like an average, right? It's you're taking a really diverse set of content and averaging it. And in my mind, when it comes to moral decision making or ruling the country or something like that, I would rather have. I was saying at that time, I would rather have that average of a diverse set than I would for individual data points, right? But with writing, to your point, it's the opposite. If you average everybody's writing style into one style, it's boring, bland, like
Well,
uh
I suppose you.
LinkedIn, like that's when people call a slop and they're like this tone, what we add is our voice, and that eccentricity is what makes it good to other people because we feel we can connect with each other, I think.
I suppose it could do like a mix of like it could. I mean I don't really know enough about it, but I'd say I suppose it could mix you with Stephen King with I guess they could. But my point, I think you overall see my point is like it'll never be able to be better than Picasso or whoever, Leonardo da Vinci
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, because it's stolen its information from them,
Mm-hmm.
unless by mixing everybody's information, it's some. But you know what I mean? Like it's never
Yeah.
going to be. It's kind of weird to think, but it's like people I think automatically think that it's going to be godlike and it's going to be like, why would you even write when it can just write better than you? But it's like I don't think that it's ever going to be naturally better than you because it's stealing from you. And when
Mm-hmm.
I say you, I mean
Yeah.
everyone. You know what I mean? It'll never be better than, like I said, Picasso, because if you say do a Picasso, it's just stealing Picasso, or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can do something very similar to it, but it'll never. So when it becomes conscious, is it just conscious from everybody in the world's different kind of input? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. There are two reasons why I think large language models seem to have such an American perspective. One is, of course,
Sorry to
we are
cut you off.
using American models, right? But
Yeah.
like it's when we say it's taking an average of everything, the question is of what? Like what is its training data? And for most of these things, we're looking at the training data of the internet, which is mostly in English, and it's not like there's also Canadians and Australians and British people writing, all kinds of people writing in English on the internet, but America really came out in front in terms of culturally of putting out a bunch of stuff on the internet, quality aside. And we've Google Books has scanned a lot of books largely in English, right? The data set it's trained on is weighted toward American, in particular, culture and values and things like that. You can see this when you're on like forums online too, where people will be like, they'll have a whole conversation, and suddenly someone will be like, it's not like that in my country. Like, oh, right. There are other people here because it's just very, everyone else kind of code switches to us because we're kind of the default there. So part of it is overwhelming amount of training data. Now, a government influenced, trying to say this carefully, model in a country that is more collective and more government run, say China, right? The Chinese government has a ton of data that it can use to build its own thing. And I would guess that the models that it builds for its citizens have its values. And so there may be some sort of bifurcation there. I don't know that they will win the race simply because I don't know. I hope not, but I don't know. So anyway, there's what the training data is. There's also system prompts, right? That all of the companies add before your prompt that tell it, what is the model's name, right? If I say Claude to Claude, does Claude know who Claude is? And it does, because it has a system prompt that tells it, hey, your name's Claude. It also tells it what kinds of topics to avoid. And so it's one way that they do alignment. It gives up-to-date data. Like for a while, it didn't know who had won the elections. They had to write it in there because people kept asking. So the system prompt is one way that the model makers can intentionally or unintentionally weight or guide a model toward a particular set of values, and values are part of culture. And so that's also partly why the big models that we use are so American seeming, is because Americans wrote the system prompts. And Claude's is public, which I think is very cool move of them. Very transparent. You can go on to Anthropic's website and read the entire system prompt, as far as I know. And I think it's really enlightening. So if any of your listeners have never seen a system prompt before, I think it's neat to see what they think it needs to know, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off in the beginning, but I was trying to like shorten what I was saying by saying, do you ever think that it'll think completely on its own? Like, can it ever, but to address what you just said, so basically what you're kind of saying is like, we're getting like in America, we're getting like a different response than like maybe the Middle East might get, than maybe China might get, than maybe, you know what I mean? Based, and obviously like, I think that most people kind of see eye to eye on most things, but with certain things, like you're not going to see anything too radical or extreme coming from another culture based on it knows, like you just said, it knows you're speaking English, it knows you're from America, most likely. So it's giving maybe us different responses than other cultures.
Almost surely, in fact. You bring up a great point, which is that it could feel American because it's responding to me, an American who is asking questions, right? Like if you ask it in Ethan messed up his name. Ethan Mollick's book Co-Intelligence. There's a series where he was trying to sort through people's experiences of these LLMs that when they feel real to people, when they feel like they are sentient, like what is going on. And he found a big part of that is, how are people approaching it? So if you ask it, do you have feelings? If you ask the LLM, do you have feelings? You'll get a really different response if you just ask it straight up, do you have feelings? Than if you say, if you ask that question really aggressively or really sweetly or really, with a lot of context and examples, or with, very simply, the way that you word, not you obviously specifically, but if the user words their prompt, really affects what they get back in a way that we can't really see into. Like it's a bit of a black box. And so it's very hard to disentangle all of this stuff. But like, what culture does it feel like? Does it feel sentient? Does it feel stupid or smart? Does it feel, you see people's LLM screenshots, and the thing is talking to them in like, to make myself feel old here, but like young people slang that I can't understand. Like, how did you get it to tell you that? And the answer is because they're interacting with it that way. And so mine interacts with me probably kind of like a 38-year-old American woman with a PhD, right? Like that's it's a feedback loop to some extent, and it's important to remember when we see that other people are having a really different experience with it than us, that that's part of it, is how we show up, as it were.
Yeah. And what was I gonna ask? Oh man. I had a question I wanted to ask, but I forgot. So do you think that it'll ever be able to think completely on its own, or do you think it's only able to think on the whole of whoever whatever input it's getting or learning from?
Gosh, I'm going to give you my bias before I give you my answer. My bias is I'm really scared of this stuff and I'm worried about it. And my answer is I don't think so. And part of the reason I don't think so is that's a protective belief, right? Because I'm afraid of it, like that much change, afraid of an entity that's very powerful that I don't have influence over. And, you know, because of that fear, it's a protective belief. Like I need to go to sleep at night. So it's helpful for me to think that it can't happen. So I want to say I don't think it will happen. And I want everyone who hears that answer to know that it's a motivated belief.
But I mean, logically, how would it happen? Like if you think through it logically,
Mhm.
I don't see
Yeah,
how
what's
it.
that spark kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't see really what would be the spark. The only thing that I can like really think of is, I mean, I essentially believe, I guess, that we have our consciousness through obviously like our brain, and our brain is like complicated enough to where it's over millions of years of evolution or whatever, it's become conscious. And so I kind of think, well, couldn't we create that? So I suppose I do actually think that we could create consciousness, but I don't really see where it would be getting its own internal data unless it's through us. But then I guess you could say, well, there are like sociopaths out there and there are psychopaths or whatever, there are bad people
Mm.
out there. So it could essentially get bad ideas from those people. But in general, it's going to supposedly, if it's getting all its information from us, the amalgamation or whatever that word is from us, everything that it's doing is essentially going to be from us. And so it's never really going to be like, okay, I'm going to like, I would hope like just destroy everyone, or
Mhm. Mhm.
that's the way that I look at it. But and that just seems logical because it's literally gotten all its information from us. There's no other way of, I don't even think of it getting information, right? I don't, unless like I said, like you have somebody who's like evil who's intentionally inputting it with bad stuff,
Mm,
I
mm,
guess.
mm.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like it
there's a
seems like it's going to abide by our rules basically as long as we have a grasp on it.
mhm. Kathy O'Neill makes almost the opposite, or the not the opposite, but like the inverse point of that, which is, this is also looking at what we used to call big data. Like this is an older perspective, pre-generative AI. But her point was basically, if these systems that we are using at the time to like evaluate people for their jobs, um, are learning off of just our data, it's not going to be able to um, novelly reason about ethics. Like it's not going to be able to push the edge, right? What she calls is moral imagination. Humans have moral imagination, right? We all got together. We decided, hey, that thing we used to do? Wasn't that terrible of us to do? We shouldn't do that anymore, right? Our like society's morality and our individual morality evolves because we can do this forward-looking moral imagination. And at the time, and I think still at the moment, that is an AI cannot do that. So it will sort of set in stone the moral perspectives that it learns from us when it learns from them. And maybe we do. Maybe we'll all become philosophers. That would be an interesting world. I don't think I would thrive in that world. I don't think I'd be a very good philosopher. And the question of like, what is the spark? There are plenty of people who believe that our brains are not, that we don't have a spark either, right? That we are deterministic. There's a neural network in here, a wet one, and it's basically like what we think is it's all one big causal chain, and that we don't have true free will or soul, which, you know, is way outside of my comfort zone to or expertise to have an opinion on that. But my point only there is that there's like what counts as consciousness, what how much of it does AI need to have before we care about it morally as an agent of its own, an agent of a type, a beast of something, you know, that matters, that we preserve it in some way. And there's a whole field of AI philosophy that I am only passingly familiar with, but people have been talking, I mean, you know, Turing, that the Turing test, which large language models have now passed, and we all decided, never mind, that we're moving the goalposts on this one. But there were a lot of tests developed by people other than Turing after that time that rely on different perspectives of what is consciousness, what is a morally valuable creature, what, you know, all of these things. People smarter than me have been thinking about for a long time. So if your audience is interested in that, there's a lot to dig in there.
Yeah, for sure. And well, it sounds like kind of like what you were saying was like we as humans kind of like decide, okay, like what I did yesterday or a week ago or a year ago is bad. I'm not going to do that anymore. Whereas what you were saying, that lady was saying, is that like the AI won't really do that. Like it'll, like once it kind of sets its belief, it won't necessarily change its belief unless I'm assuming, unless the people who control it change its belief, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it won't like really learn from its actions unless it literally gets to a point where it is sentient like us. But as of right now, it just can't. But I mean, can't we just kind of like change its beliefs? I don't know. So the way that I look at it, at least as of now, and who knows in 100 years, and it's like I would probably even say in my lifetime, like I said, I am kind of like to a certain extent like naive, but is that I don't think it's most likely going to become conscious, and I don't think that it's really going to think on its own. So whatever it's doing, it's basically just like a tool, just like a calculator is a tool, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to do what we tell it to do. Now I think that like you could have some bad person somehow make some sort of AI that is evil, but that's just like anything else, you know, using a tool for it for bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not too worried about it, but um so moving forward, I really kind of asked you what the singularity looks like, but just moving forward within the next, let's just say 5, 10, I am kind of curious to still to what you think the singularity would look like once it starts replicating. But
Mm-hmm.
let's just do next 5, 10 years. Where do you think we are? I mean, the way that I'm looking at things is kind of like positively, like, okay, if the AI image generator, video generator, the chats, all that. Oh yeah, what the question I want to ask you before? Sorry, I'm all over the place. I'm like I have like ADD
No, I get
ADHD
it.
right now.
It's such a big topic.
Yeah,
Tangents are
like
almost necessary.
I feel like I'm more out of it than I normally am. It's probably just with the topic, but what I wanted to ask you about was oh my God, I think I forget. Sorry. Okay, so let's just go with that. Let's just go with the next oh yeah, okay. So I remembered it. Okay, so I've heard that like how it works is it goes off the next word. I never really understood this, but how the LLMs work is it kind of goes from like word to word to word. Like do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
How does that work? Like how, like if it's giving you an answer, how is it like literally going off the last word to the next word to the next word? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Um, this is a good question. Yes, what is technically trying to accomplish is predicting the next token, which is word or set of words. This is different from past kinds of AI that do things like classify, right? Take a bunch of things and put them into groups that it learned about, or cluster, take a bunch of unknown data and put it into groups. What a large language model is trying to do is predict to the next token. What the transformer architecture, so when you look at ChatGPT, the GPT stands for generative, so creating new stuff. pre-trained, which just means they trained it on a bunch of stuff before you got it, so that it's useful. And transformer. The transformer architecture is what made a really big leap in terms of being able to understand the whole text before it, right? So in the past, if you had just asked it to predict the next word, it's going to go off on tangents much worse than either you or I are doing, right? It's like, good morning. And then if it only remembers morning, then it's going to be like, well, morning glory. Okay, glory to God, right? Like God. And, it's going to be nonsense, basically. So the transformer architecture allows it to have a much bigger, when we think of it, a context window. It can consider a larger text. And that's how it's able to be so much more intelligible than past chatbots. At least that's my understanding.
Okay, I still don't get how it would go from like good morning to like, let's just say, and it's only going off of its own word. It's not going off of my previous word, right? So if I
Mm-hmm.
say, I don't know, like, how are you doing today? Or it's like, good morning, how are you doing today? And it says good morning. How would it like literally go from good morning? You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing well today. How?
I think I understand your question, but let me know if I don't. Um, Part of what it is predicting not just the part, it's hard to say. It is using your prompt in that it's almost like you can imagine it saying, hey, if someone went on to a forum online and asked this question, what might that look like? Right. But then instead you say, imagine you're a marketing expert. And so I go, okay, so maybe this is a conversation between a regular person and a marketing expert. But regardless, it is guessing what you would want, what a person would want after the text that it gave. So it is including that in its prediction. So even its very first word is predicted based on what you wrote in there and its
So
system prompt, which we can't see.
so it's kind of guessing based off of context of what it's learned from previous conversations.
And especially, so this is unclear. It seems the way that they explain it is they say that it's only using the current chat. Some people are speculating, posting little pieces of data here and there that make it seem like it is actually learning from all of your conversations, even if you have that privacy setting turned off. And I don't know the answer to that one. And I'm not convinced, by the way, that the model makers would know if it was. I don't know what their back end looks like, but that seems suspect to me. But in theory, what it's learning from is all of its pre-training. So more or less the internet before its cutoff date, the system prompt, your prompt, and anything you attached to your prompt. If it's in a project like Claude and ChatGPT have projects, so you can add a bunch of extra context that persists across all of your chats. And so given all of that context, it's wondering, okay, here I'm predicting what this person wants to hear next.
And so moving forward, not only is it predicting based off everything prior to it, but then now it's going to learn from your current conversation into the future conversations and ideally give you what you want more. So that's like, unless you don't see it this way, that's kind of like a good reason to maybe use the same one if you want it to give, if you want it to know you more. And not only is it learning to give me something more based on my conversation, but then also it's also learning from me to even answer other people's questions, right? It's constantly learning even from each individual prompt, right?
It it says that it is only if there are prompt reuse settings in most of the large models. If you have those turned off, allegedly it's not using your prompt unless if the LLM you're using has like a thumbs up, thumbs down at the bottom of its response and you vote, this was helpful, this wasn't helpful, it will definitely use that for learning, right? Because you asked it to, basically, right? It's going to take that in. So yes, there's some amount of continuous learning, and it is supposed to be restricted by some of your settings, whether those things are used just for you, just in your chat, or for everybody.
Okay. And then where do you see this going in the next 5, 10 years? Yeah, what are the next? Because it seems like it's obviously going faster and faster, right? So,
It does seem to be accelerating faster and faster. There are still people out there who are like, this is the peak. And I feel like, I don't know how you could possibly know that. So I don't tend to agree with that. I think that the next The next development for which there is clearly a lot of market demand, and therefore the one I think that people are working on the most, is agents. So instead of just being able to respond in a chat window, it can control other applications on your computer. So then I could say, please, like, plan my vacation for me. And you give it has your logins, and it literally plans your, like, books it and everything, right? Or you've got it up in GitHub and it will do a pull request, and well, it'll unit test, it'll do the whole thing at end and push it, right? And Claude, that's what Claude seems to be investing a lot of their, Anthropic, a lot of their development budget into coding specific agents. But a lot of other ones are a little more multi-purpose. I think there's another set of concerns that come up with that. Like, are we sure they're making good decisions? What if they make a bad one, etc.? But my sense is that is the next place we're going to go, and that will explode the usefulness of these tools for a lot of people who don't necessarily need text, code, a picture, or a video. They need a task done. And if it can do the task for you, literally, instead of just explaining to you how to do it, that can save you an incredible amount of time. And there are some of these out at the moment. I think they're less, either require a lot of fiddling or are very scope constrained. But I think that seems to be where, in the immediate term, a lot of that development will go. And once they can affect change in the real world, I really hope that if we create something that can think for itself, or that is as powerful, as smart as we are across domains, it is not an agent yet. Because I feel like once it can change the world, that, like, change things in the world, that is going around human agency to some extent, to one more step, I guess.
What do you mean by change things in the world? Like almost like they become like physical, like robots type thing, or
Even just like booking a vacation or sending an email without the user's involvement, right? If I say, hey, can you add a new feature to my website? Can you think about a new product? Now, I don't think that it will be anywhere close to being able to do this, but in theory, an agent would allow someone to say, this is what my organization does. We want to do a new product. Please develop a new product, like design a product that you think will work for our market, and reach out to a manufacturer and, do the designs, right? Like that. In theory, if it has access to all the software in your computer, not just a text output, it could do a lot of that work, which is risky for people who want to be paid.
yeah. See, I have a problem with the agent thing because it's like I just don't trust enough to be doing the correct thing. Like if I tell it to, like, for one, I would rather just do it myself. But if I tell it to do something and then it messes up on that, and like you're thinking, okay, it booked my vacation and it booked my flight, and then it like messed up somewhere, and then you're
Mhm.
there.
Took me to
You know what I
Portland, Maine
mean?
instead of Portland, Oregon or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like but then it's like if you have to go back and check that what it did was correct, then it's like you might as well just do it yourself. So it just seems same thing with like emails. It's like what if it like shoots out the wrong email to somebody? It seems like it could be like really at some point it seems like it could be too complicated. But what about with like robots type stuff or autonomous vehicles? I mean,
Mhm.
like it seems like we've been close to completely autonomous vehicles for a while. How close are we to actually
That's a good
making it
question.
so like everyone has not only like Waymo or whatever, but like everyone's just driving around autonomously?
Mm-hmm. Uh, Good question. I think the autonomous vehicles question has a lot of really specific concerns. Regulatory also, like, for example, your city, your state, and your country all have to allow that, you know? Um, and there's the question of, it's expensive to buy a car, right? Historically, in car technology, we have only enforced rules about what cars have to be after after that rule. What am I trying to say? So when the seatbelt came out, and then eventually, after a long time, actually, a really embarrassingly long time, we were like, these seatbelts actually seem like they're a good idea. All cars should have seatbelts in them. They didn't require everyone who had an old car to add seatbelts to their car. They only required new cars made after that point to have seatbelts. And so even if we were able to make a perfectly good, like a perfectly behaving autonomous vehicle, and they were available at a regular car price approximately, there are still going to be people, either because of cost or because of like discomfort with the technology. Like, I don't think my dad will ever drive an autonomous car. Like, I think there are some people who just, you can't force people to, you certainly cannot force people to buy a car. Can you force people to not drive an older car? We have never done that. We maybe could ban human driven cars from the road, but that would be a really big political lift um, that I don't know if we would do, because it would require, if your law requires everyone to buy a $20,000 thing, that is a rule that impacts the poor a lot more than it impacts the rich, for one thing. So anyway, I think getting all cars to be autonomous will be a practically difficult thing to do. I do think in terms of the technology being there, it's getting better. When I was in my PhD program, I was studying AI, but this is before LLMs in 2015. So the big thing we were worried about, it was autonomous vehicles, because truck driver is one of the most popular jobs in this country, or plus now, and also delivery on top of that. Like, a lot of people are suddenly not going to have anything to do if trucks are replaced by self-driving trucks, and people prefer autonomous delivery or rideshare type things.
So how long before we were to that point, you think?
I
Where it's taking
Yeah.
over truck drivers' jobs.
Oof.
It's
Yeah, that's a good question. What I'm about to say is so speculative, like I don't even want to put my name on it, but because you asked, I will try. I think within 5 years, we will have cars that can more or less reliably drive themselves across a broad range of conditions. I think the next step is legal hurdles, right? To getting, ensuring that it is legal to drive these cars across jurisdictions in, for example, the US. I think generally legal stuff in America takes a long time. I can't imagine it being less than another 5 years after that. And both of those are necessary conditions for replacing truck drivers. Another thing to consider is labor power, right? Wide scale protests can have some impact on creating new legislations to protect human workers. If people want to add resistance to that, I think starting earlier is better. I don't know whether that will have an impact. It is a little bit tougher if your biggest card you can play is a strike. Basically, I will not work. If there's no social pressure, you can't say that an AI is a scab, right? Normally the pressure is, we're not working. You also shouldn't drive for them because, we're all fighting for workers' rights in general. But if you can just replace them with an AI, their trump card is kind of gone. But I do think the government hopefully will give a crap about these people. So maybe there's another 2 or 3 or 4 years where we try to sort out, before we legalize or before we require everyone to use self-driving trucks, to have some protection for people, some retraining option, something for people who used to be truck drivers. I hope that would add some friction. So now we're at 14. Yeah, there you go. I made up something. 14.
yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm not gonna like hold it to you, like whatever
Yeah,
your
yeah,
best guess is. 14 years though.
yeah.
Is that
That's
what
my
you
best
mean?
guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Okay.
before um, autonomous trucks can replace human drivers.
Yeah, which is still taking. And I was wondering, like, because I do Amazon Flex delivery driver,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kind of wondering, like they could obviously get to the point where they have the car automatically drive itself to the house, but then it's like once it's there, how is it going to like deliver it? Like it seems like there would
Oh,
have to
right.
be, you know what I mean?
Is
It
there
seems
like a
like
little tray that comes out and it's like, here you go? But then
yeah,
a
and it
lot of the purpose of that, or a lot of people use that because they're not that mobile. So they maybe can't come out and get the thing.
yeah, like it literally needs, for the most part, I literally need to walk it to the door, and so unless
Hmm.
it somehow is able to like put it in like a little box or something, that seems like it would still be a problem if you actually have to like walk to the door. In terms of just robots walking around, it seems like the robot idea. I think that like before the chat GPTs, the LLMs, I think that I kind of people just kind of thought it was going to be robots, but it seems like the robot thing
Mhm.
is almost kind of like more complicated than we think. So,
Mhm.
or not. Do you think that robots we're going to be seeing like robots walking around within the next 5 to 10, 15 years?
Robotics is such an interesting question because I agree, right? If you look at the Jetsons, that view of the future does not have a super intelligent chatbot, but it sure does have a lot of robots walking around doing laundry and, making food and stuff. And so for a long time, that has been our view. And I agree with you that just it turns out it's harder than we thought, first of all. Um, and also, this thing turns out to be easier than we thought, right? So there's both of those things are going on. I have attended conferences where there are telepresence robots, people participating in the like scooting this little robot from room to room and showing up and answering questions and asking questions and you know participating kind of physically in thing. Yes, just yesterday I went to a restaurant that had one of those it's almost like a little busing robot. It like drives bins or food around to deliver it to people. But in terms of like robots that would look to us like an agent, right? Like a C3PO or something that's like mm, not as not as human controlled or rule based, right? That is like making its own choices about where to go. I hate to say this, but I think that the first ones will probably be designed for war applications because there is a lot of demand and a lot of money in that area. Um, and I think that is in the short term fairly viable, right? Like we've seen those Boston Robotics dogs, and um, there's no reason they need to be shaped like a person. They can just be shaped as like the most stable weapon delivering creature you can make, which is
Yeah.
it's dark to think about. But yeah, I think we're in terms of robots in everyday life. I think the how much I would pay a decent amount for a robot that would do all my laundry for me forever, but not enough that I could actually pay for the cost of a robot, right? Like they're expensive, and I think until they are way less expensive to design and manufacture and distribute, we're going to be seeing them used for things that are also expensive, right? Um, I think there's a lot of interesting applications in small groups of tiny robots. Have you seen those like sky displays that are not fireworks? They're like all these little drones flying around.
Yeah.
They also have ones that are designed sort of biomimicry based on ants. Not that they're as small as ants, but that they work together. It's like one consciousness, even more so than ants are, right? It's like one mind is controlling all of these little things. That's something we can't do right now and is cheaper to make than a human-sized robot. So I think that's a really interesting area for robotics to work in. That was also less war-y, which is nice. Um, but I think most of the things that we imagine like a robot that looks like a person and is replacing a person to do are they're going to be cheaper for humans to do for a long time simply because robotics is challenging and expensive.
Yeah, and it seems like it could just be like really clunky kind of too. Like if, like if I don't know, like if it falls over or something and I can't get back up, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it just seems like really kind of, and then not only that, but the energy, it probably would take up a ton of energy. And that's a big thing with this AI too, right? Is the energy. That's like you need a ton of energy to like output even like the LLMs, right? So it's like they have like whole warehouses full of like energy sources, right? And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
I guess it could get to a point where like we almost like hit a limit with either energy or just and like weren't they saying recently like it's almost hitting a limit too with how much knowledge it's able to feed it?
Yeah,
So do
they're
you think
looking at synthetic training data, which is to say, oh, fun. Um, which is to say, using the outputs of LLMs to train LLMs, which really feels like an opportunity for a feedback loop that I don't know. I hope someone's working on that. I'm sure they are. I can't be the first person to think of it. Um, but yeah, there are resource limitations. I think that in the long term, science fiction has thought, well, what if we just surround the whole planet with solar panels, right? Like there are um, people in like the imaginaries, as it were, there are people who've been thinking about like how do we solve energy limitations. I think that is a really important question. Um, I do think if we get to the point where we need to make that many solar panels, humans are in trouble. But yeah,
You mean like if everything's just kind of like powered, there's like solar power like
if
everywhere
we're
kind of
relying
thing?
on an AI that much that it needs that much power, like there's not a lot less for us to do at that point.
Yeah. And then in terms of like movies and stuff, they say, we're probably getting pretty close to the point where it's AI is going to just be able to make full. I think we're actually kind of there, but once it gets to the point where it's actually pretty good, I mean, we're pretty close to that, right? Already, I think, making
They're
movies.
making claims that I think Claude, one of them, is claiming that it can just create it can build an application like a phone app, for example, from front to back. Uh I don't know if that's true. I My partner loves to make little like little video games with like just a prompt or two, and it is amazing to me that that is possible. How much did I cry trying to make my first JavaScript button that when you press it, it counts up? You know what I mean? Like that took me so long to learn, and it's incredible to watch it just be like, oh yeah, here's the game, and there's a little pig that follows you around. You know, whatever. It's certainly already making a big difference in terms of coding things that we already know how to do and like can imagine. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I've heard about like vibe coding. I'm assuming you've probably heard that term,
sure, yeah,
where like I guess you just do the code by entering in the prompt, and then it like creates
hmm
the code, and so you'll just be able to like you just said like create an app just by telling it what you want it to be like,
yeah, yeah.
which is crazy. And so for me, yeah, the main thing is I guess would just be like what I'm pretty excited about is just like making YouTube videos and how easy it is. Like it is a cheat. Back to the beginning, it is like kind of like a cheat code, but I still enjoy doing it. So I mean, we're kind of already at the point where if I'm like I just want to have like a podcast with the AI, I can pretty much do that.
Notebook
And
LM will
then
just do that for you right now.
yeah, exactly. And then that's another thing too. Like if I'm kind of confused on if I use the Notebook LM, and I know you can add to it or whatever, and then put that onto YouTube. Like I
Mm,
don't know if
if you would earn that money, basically.
well, like if it would be legal, because yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I've literally asked Google, can I do that? I haven't done it with Notebook LM yet, but and they say yeah, you can put it Notebook LM in your YouTube videos. So it's like to me, it just seems crazy, but it also seems like technically they're going to be profiting from it because Google owns YouTube. So
hmm
whatever I use to put on YouTube, same with the VO videos that I use or the art or whatever. So yeah, so in my opinion, it's looking good for now, but I think eventually I could have the same opinion as you. Like it could eventually turn bad. Hopefully it doesn't turn bad, but right now I think I'm liking it. Would you agree that as of right now you're
Yeah,
liking
there's
it?
some things that I would say I'm basically on the same page as you. Right now, there are applications of it that I'm worried about, but it's a tool, right? Right now, it is still a tool that is in our control. And so I think that those misuses are the responsibility of the people who are doing them, not a indictment of the technology itself. And I think there are a lot of people out there who say they can't get anything useful out of it. I've gotten a lot of useful stuff out of it and been able to do so much more, especially in my side projects, less so at work because there's like sensitive data there and there are there's like a trust question that is hard to get around. But in terms of like putting stuff out for my own use, this blog that I'm writing about AI, um, I use it for that every day. And I always put at the bottom, here's how I used LLM, right? Like, here's the model I asked, here's what I asked it, and here's how I thought about the output, right? Was this great? Did I throw it away? What kind of edits did I make? And the goal of that is like transparency and showing people different ways of using the thing. But right now I get a ton of value out of it, way more than the $40 a month I'm paying for the various things that I'm using. Like it is an easy yes to me. I worry about people who are like, I mean, you've called me a doomer twice, which is absolutely your evaluation to make.
Well,
But
I felt
like,
like you had said that, right? Didn't you say that in the beginning? But or maybe you didn't use the term doomer, but
yeah. Oh, I am super not offended by it.
pessim Pessimistic.
I'm
Yeah.
pessimistic. I'm
Yeah.
just pessimistic as a person anyway. But I know a lot of people who are like, I won't even touch it. And those people I really worry about. First of all, I get it. Like, I get it. It's freaky. I can't, I'm not going to say it's not freaky, but like there are already market pressures to get good at using this stuff. And I feel for people who for whom that creates a conflict. But otherwise, I think so far it's a takeoff that is at a pace that I'm so far comfortable with. Um, Worried about the very long term. I hope I I hope that however it goes, we as I was gonna say a country, but I mean a species can like figure this out together. I don't know.
Yeah, and you said a little bit earlier that it's not really so much the technology's fault, it's the people who are at the top of, or the companies that are running the technology. And as long as I feel like there's somebody to blame or somebody to be held accountable,
Mm.
even if even if Mark Zuckerberg or whoever is doing something wrong, like you can still say, hey, like the government should be able to step in and say, hey, like you're doing this wrong. And I'm kind of assuming that's why, I don't really know this for sure, but I'm kind of assuming that's why OpenAI originally was a nonprofit. Was I think the government wanted to make sure that they were doing things correctly, and whether or not they are, I don't know. But isn't that true? Wasn't OpenAI kind of used by the government, or that's why it was a nonprofit, to kind of, they're like, okay, we're going to do this, but we want to make sure that you guys are doing this correctly. Like I think they're at least trying to make sure that we're doing it correctly, as opposed to just letting them run wild with it.
I don't know a lot about the regulation aspect of that. I do know that OpenAI, I believe they used to be a nonprofit in part two because they wanted to credibly signal we're doing this for us as a species, not for me, Sam Altman, or whoever. Um, and you made a good point too about like accountability. And what that brought up to me too is that a lot of the decisions that LLM model makers have made, did I say model twice? Yes, I did. LLM makers have been partly guided by product liability law, right? About if I put out this product that does this thing, can I be liable for that impact? And our current product liability laws do not have to be, I intended for it to be used this way, right? It's pretty broad. And so a lot of the restrictions that are currently on these things are because of product liability law. And I'm not like, as a person who's nervous, I am not out here often trying to say, let them free, let them do what they want. But maybe product liability law isn't the best regime or lens to look at this from, because for example, if Claude became sentient tomorrow, we would be in a bit of trouble because it, for example, will never talk about sex. And sex is the thing that happens to people. People do it. It's a reality. And I'm not sure if we want a sentient super intelligence that thinks that's bad, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and that is true for, and unfortunately that's just the most salient one, which is why I came up. But like, there's a lot of things
Yeah.
in that understandably companies are making rules to limit their liability, and also we might want a more comprehensive way of guiding of regulating AI that is both more and less restrictive than product liability law.
Yeah. And I've said this before, where it's like, as long as we're all adults using it, which I'm kind of hoping that they're not letting, I don't, kids use it. I don't know, but
Oh, kids are
as
definitely
long,
using it.
well, I mean, they're using
Yeah.
it, but it's like, as long as, I guess, as long as it knows that I'm an adult, but I guess maybe it doesn't know that for sure, but it should be able to talk about sex. It should be able to talk about anything that's realistic, or any, like if you ask it to like
Mhm, mhm.
do as long as it's not like, pornography or whatever, like it should be able to talk about it. I think that's what you're saying too, right? As long as it's like reality. Like if I ask it to give me a picture of something that happened in the Bible or something, or whatever, like in history, and it says, sorry, I can't do that. It's kind of like, well, you should be able to, but this is in the Bible, or this is in, history, like this was World War II or whatever. Um, if that makes sense. Like I don't think that, like, as long as, like, if something's real and something happened, it should be able to do it. In my opinion, it shouldn't. And I know that there was an issue with it, like blocking a lot of stuff. But it seems like it's almost getting better. As far as I've seen, it seems like it's getting better. But one other thing I wanted to ask you about was, and this is kind of a little bit off the topic, but Amazon owns Anthropic, right? I think kind of overall, I think Anthropic is an Amazon company, right? Or if it's not Amazon, it's like, but it doesn't really even matter. I've heard before that Amazon wanted to do some sort of kind of, I don't really want to say communist type thing, but basically the type of thing that we're talking about where like they own everything and then everybody kind of is essentially I have a hard time explaining it, but basically like we're all living in some sort of Amazon world. And
Like a
does that
metaverse
make
type of
sense?
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, not even a metaverse type of thing, but like a um everything's just kind of like a planned out community kind of thing, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard about that at all or no? If you
I have
haven't,
not.
then okay.
I haven't.
I've only heard about it, and it's not from like a necessarily a negative aspect. It's just kind of like they ultimately, I think, wanted everybody to like live in this kind of social. I don't know how true it is. It's a thing, socialist type community where like, and they're just kind of giving everybody everything, and
Hmm.
it's kind of similar to the AI.
Oh,
Does
I
that
do
make
remember
sense?
hearing something vaguely about that. And I think a lot of the discourse that got to me about it was, hey, this sounds a lot like company towns from back in the day where everyone was paid in script and they could, they're basically indentured servants to their company. And like, that didn't go that well.
Yeah. So
Um,
I was
not
just
that
wondering
that's
if
what they're
you
trying to do, but that's what it resonated with for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had heard of anything about that because I've only heard about it and I don't know how true it is or if Jeff Bezos actually wanted to do that or I've heard that they want some sort of like system like that. But
Mm, yeah. I'm not that
ultimately,
familiar with it, but if it helps, Anthropic, I just looked it up because I was not sure, is privately held and has significant investment from Amazon, but it also has significant investment from Google. So it's less likely that they would there at least is some pushback opportunity there from the other significant investors, right? It's not owned by Amazon, um, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective.
yeah. Part of the reason why I brought it up was because I think that I would ultimately be fine, not like full on communism or full on socialism, but like if the end goal was being in a situation where these AIs did kind of like back to what we were talking about before, control everything, and we were just this is kind of like I think this is like the ideal kind of what do they call it when it's like a perfect civilization or whatever.
Utopia.
Exactly. I think that like that would be the ideal would be maybe everybody's given like a certain amount of money and then you can like still do what you want as opposed to being like forced to work and make money. Will that actually happen? I don't know, but that the utopia like seems like what I'm hoping for when it comes to AI
Hmm.
utopia. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I do. That makes
I don't know
sense.
how realistic it is though. So, but
I don't know. I struggle like as soon as it's like I don't even want to live with in an HOA. Like I don't know if I could do planned community. Woo. But like to your point, there's always a trade-off to be made, right? Like if the world is that much better, I do think it matters if people can choose to do it, but just like autonomous vehicles, they're more useful. Like this idea is more useful if everybody is doing it, or at least everybody within some scope is doing it. Um, yeah, that's an interesting idea. And like, will one of these, if we're looking way out in the future, hopefully post singularity, can these things change our mind? By which I don't mean convince us of something, but literally alter how we are feeling. And if they can make us feel happy all the time, eliminate all of the um, threats, end death, like, but what if the world that they put us in that they made us happy in is like a blank white room? Everybody gets their own blank white room, but you're going to be happy in there because we made you happy. Like from from that blank white room, if I'm happy, I'm happy. But from outside, before that time, that freaks me out. I want to live in a blank white room, just sitting there being happy. That seems not like a
yeah,
life to me.
sounds like heroin or something where you're
Yeah, yes,
like
it
you
does sound like drugs. Yes, it does. Yeah.
think you're happy but you're not, and it's like I think that like what it would be is I guess it would be like it's all just data, and even though we're like in a blank white room, what we are seeing in our mind, I guess, or whatever, like through the elect like electronic impulses or whatever is just good. I guess that's kind of like what you're saying, right? Like it's just even though it's like we're not really doing anything, we're just sitting there like happy,
Mm.
which
Yeah,
is
like a
really like
matrix pod, maybe.
yeah, it is really kind of depressing. But yeah, so I recently listened. I forget. Don't remember his name, but he was like I guess a trans humanist, and he was talking about like kind of like post singularity, like or singularity type stuff. Where like I mean, it was really pretty wild. Like he was saying like we potentially could like bring people back from the dead, even from like
Right.
thousands of years ago or whatever. And I mean that yeah, when you think about, I don't even really know what post singularity means. Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Mhm.
will there be a post singularity, or will it just all be still part of the singularity?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That reminds me a little bit of that. This is what you're talking about is way more extreme than this, but something that feels more immediate and practical that would cause a similar problem is that idea that look, someone that you love dies, you're devastated, you upload all the social media that they ever made, and maybe their email account or videos of them, all of this data about them, and you create a substitute of your friend or family member. There's a Black Mirror episode about this. I'm sure it was creepy because they all
yeah,
are. And yeah, it's tough that we are what a weird time to be alive that we're having to like think about all of this stuff in advance. Like,
yeah.
ugh.
I'm still kind of under the impression that it's not going to be for a while, but this stuff, I could be wrong, but and then the guy who was interviewing him asked like if you were able to bring he was like kind of like how is that even possible if you don't even have the DNA anymore? But somehow this guy was saying we'd be able to like recreate it. I mean he was getting in like the quantum level of like like
Oh,
basically it's like you literally just recreate through like almost like a what do they call those things that like just like create something? It's like a machine that like you want to make like a whatever and it just like can create it. I forgot. Um, but he was basically saying like if you recreate, and I don't know how you would do this with the bones or whatever of the person, but basically he was saying you'd be able to recreate through like quantum level. I mean, it was crazy. But then the guy was like, would it still be the same consciousness? And he was like, yeah.
And just have memories.
But then he was like, but if you can do it like 10 times, like let's just say I died, you can
Hmm.
recreate me 10 times, would it be the same consciousness as me? I don't know, but
Yeah.
it gets pretty
Glad I'm not a
crazy.
philosopher. That sounds hard.
Yeah, to me it's all interesting to think about. But so lastly, your company is a policy and innovation center. You guys mainly focus on AI for economics, right?
The AI aspect of our work is pretty new. Mainly we have sort of like a policy side of the house and a research side of the house. I'm on the research side of the house, and what we do is work on research projects that um, promote, I would say, human flourishing in right now San Diego region. So what that might look like is we know we don't have enough behavioral health workers right now. That's everyone from substance abuse counselors who need a certificate to psychiatrists who need a doctorate. All along that area, we are short. So we used quantitative data from the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics to try to understand how many do we need, and how many people are going to lose to retirement each year is also part of that. And then we talked to people. We did a bunch of qualitative research to try to figure out when people are leaving, why are they leaving, and what are the bottlenecks along the training pipeline that we could try to release, right? How do we make this easier for people to get in? And how do we make it easier for people to stay in? So that's the kind of research project that we do. That research project actually ended up in $75 million being invested in the problems we identified, which is great. It's now easier to become a behavioral health person and stay a behavioral health worker than it was before. So, like, fantastic. The new AI stuff that we're doing is kind of along those same lines. So right now we're working on a project um, in advanced manufacturing. So these are jobs that are relatively stable, right? The stable hours, predictable hours at least. They have decent pay, and they're somewhat skilled, and you can get into them with a 2-year degree or less. So if we have if we have jobs out there that are like making good money and aren't expensive to get into, you don't have to pay for a whole bachelor's degree. We want to keep those jobs as much as we can. So our job right now on this project is to work with the employers, training providers, and workers and try to figure out, as AI is getting implemented in this field, what new skills are we going to need to train incumbent current workers on? And how can we prepare the next generation of people who are going to be working in these jobs to have the full suite of skills that they need to work in an AI augmented manufacturing place, with the goal of helping people not lose their jobs, right? The jobs they already have, um, and sort of ensure that these jobs continue to exist, accessible, well-paying jobs. So that's the kind of work that we do.
Okay, and you're using AI to do this.
In this case, we are trying to figure out how AI will impact this industry and the occupations that work there, and then create training that'll help workers understand how to work within that an industry that has had AI implemented into it. There are other things that I use AI for personally, but for research, we really feel like right now the systems are not in a place where they can integrate, like analyze the data in a way that we feel is robust and apply it and like understand the implications of it in the world. Also, I don't think that the demand, the acceptance, the tolerance for AI produced work is there among our clients, right? They aren't hiring us because we're someone who can write a prompt. They're hiring us because we have PhDs, frankly. And so like they're paying for all that expertise that we built that right now, for now, thank goodness, AI cannot do.
Okay, and you guys are a nonprofit,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Okay, okay, cool. So, and then in terms of making money, what do you think the best ways to go about that are going to be with AI? Like the
Mm,
jobs to get, the jobs not to get. Um,
yeah. So there's some really cool research going on. I think that it's with Anthropic uses a thing called, I think it's called Clio. I really wish I had looked this up before this interview. It's a way of protecting prompting data while still being able to learn from it. It's one of the, oh, I forgot the name of it. Not federated. Anyway, point is, um, they've used prompting data connected to skills data from ONET, which is from the government, to try to figure out which occupations have the most tasks that are, they call it exposed to AI in like the near-ish future, or like, sort of currently, like what are people using this for and what jobs are doing a lot of the stuff that it's really good at. And that gives you somewhat of a percent. It's not a probability percent. It's more like of my job, how much of it might I lose to automation in the near future? So I would recommend folks, listeners, look into that. I do think if I were in college right now, I might steer away from, um, uh, uh, gosh, I'm hesitating because I don't want people to hear this and listen, oh my gosh, I'm screwed because I already majored in this thing, or right.
yeah.
But I think some people who are going to face some disruption in the short term are entry-level software development, freelance designers, right? Art less so, I think, because I really do think that's about human connection more. But when you're looking at design, like logo design and things like that, um, the LLMs are getting better at doing that persistently and well. And freelance, like that's a route used by companies who have lower resources, who are the ones who are the most likely to go for an automated option. So those are two that stand out to me as like um, tough in terms of near future disruption. Copywriting, possibly proofreading, or copy editing is the word I was looking for also. Um, but I hope that in all of these cases, there is some space for either like a white glove option, right? Like it isn't just, hey, I send you my book, you send it back to me fixed up. There's more service involved. And like that's a way that a person could continue to make a living in a disruptive industry, or taking an artisan approach, right? Like I just offer, I can buy a chair from IKEA I could buy a way better chair from someone who made it themselves by their hands. And I expect to pay more because I know a human made it. And that is part of why it is valuable to me, is that a human was involved in it. Right. So there's some artisan copywriting, I think, is one of those cases, maybe coding. I'm not sure. And in coding, there's also the option to specialize, right, in like a rare language or in very cutting edge custom development. But that requires, a lot of investment in skill building too. So, sorry, that was kind of blabbing, but those are some thoughts.
Oh, that's fine. And then as far as like doing the job of AI, I mean, is it an extremely complicated job to build the AI? Yeah. So it's like they probably have like the smartest people doing that, right?
They sure are paying a lot, so I think they have got the smartest people, and they may indeed. Um,
Yeah.
I think they probably do. And I don't know to what extent, like, if you look at all the people who are involved in building an LLM, I do not know the answer. I wonder how many of them are coders, how many of them are um, doing other tasks, like who is making the decision about what goes in that system prompt. I certainly want to know, like, what is that job? Maybe that's, um, if we end up in a world where we are relying a lot on narrow intelligence and we're building a lot of custom or wrappers or something like that, who are the people who are shaping these custom, like, hey, Walmart has their own now for internal use or something? Who's the one who's like setting that up for them? Maybe that's an interesting job in that area.
And then in terms of like doing, if like you've always wanted to be a writer, or you've always, like for me, I've always wanted to do YouTube or maybe building apps or whatever, in terms of using AI to do something, not necessarily a job, but like something that you just enjoy doing on your own,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think are the best ways to make money doing
Mm.
that? Like you kind of mentioned being able to like write a whole book and just publish it using AI. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you see some good areas for that to make money just doing what you love?
Oh, that's a great question. What's really interesting about the way you frame that is there are two implicit goals. And when you mentioned directly was making money, but also part of that is doing something you love. And if for
That's the
example,
goal. Yeah.
pressing a button and outputting a book isn't what I love, right? It's it's taking away, in fact, the part that I love, which is the pressing of the keys that make words that make sentences that make a book. Um, and I also don't think that the primary value I am adding or the most rewarding thing is actually the key pressing. I think maybe it's the idea development, the argument, like developing the argument, um, connecting with, telling a story to connect with someone. I actually, and that can still be augmented. Maybe it's okay if and this is not what I do, to be clear, but a lot of like Joanna Penn, if anyone is interested in writing an AI, Joanna Penn is a great resource. She calls herself an AI assisted artisan author. And she thinks putting words together isn't her main goal. And she has a fantastic time. She really enjoys working with the AI to come up with a plot or, to fill out the scene or whatever. She's not writing all of the words necessarily, but she still gets a lot out of that creative process for her, right? I don't think I'm that far. I do think I really still enjoy tapping the keys and making the words and picking out just the right one. But I think for if the project is for love, automating the part that you love is is not the way to go. So maybe looking at what can these things do really well right now, and what it's almost like a slightly harder algebra problem where um, you have to figure out what the output is, and like this part is easy. What's the part in the middle? Um, maybe it's maybe actually, maybe for example, for YouTube, leaving aside the video editing or like maybe content creation in general, and you feel like, look, for whatever I'm doing, a blog is really important, but I don't have time to write a blog. And I'm not going to be able to do this unless I can write a blog, right? I can't think of a single thing like that because blogs aren't that. I mean, I like to blog, but I'm not sure it's the answer. Um, Maybe it is coding, right? Like I've got a great idea for a game. I'm not me. Someone out there is a fantastic game designer, right? They've built like amazing board games that everyone loves, but they don't know how to code anything. If the AI can help them take that extra step, I think that is, assuming that they wouldn't otherwise be able to hire someone, I think that's interesting. With writing, there are now much better AI voices that can narrate your book for you. And that is directly taking the work of someone who might otherwise be a human narrator, but that is an expensive job. And many, many, many authors it's not a question of an AI voice or a human voice. It's a question of AI voice or no voice, right? Because it's expensive to get an audiobook made. I feel I did not answer your question. I talked for a while.
No, you did. You brought up like Cody and AI voice. But yeah, like for me, it's like I think that people could look at it and be like, oh, like we said before in the beginning, it's kind of like cheating, and you're using the LLMs, you're generating images, videos, it's fake. But like I still like enjoy doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be able to do it without the AI because, like you said, it takes so long. It would take me so long to write everything out, and then, like I said, get the literally like go places to get the pictures. That now I'm just able to do it all in like, you know, one foul swoop. Ideally, that's like the goal. And for me, it's like it is super convenient and super easy, but like I still enjoy doing it. Now, don't get me wrong, I still do other things too. Like I still like to go places, but I can't always go places, you know what I mean? To take the actual picture. So, and sometimes you do need to, like sometimes the AI just doesn't get it right. But so I just think it's such a convenient tool, and even if people think it's cheating, it's like, well, that's where technology is going. So, it's kind of like you either
Mm-hmm.
join in or
Yeah.
get left behind. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to promote if you besides your company, but then also I always ask if there's any like movies, music, TV shows, podcasts, music, whatever you're into that you want to throw out there. It could either be on AI or not, or just whatever you're into. So whatever you want to
Sure.
plug for yourself too.
Great. Thank you so much for that opportunity.
Yeah, no problem.
My work is at thinkpic.org. That's sort of the whole think tank, the policy and the research side. I write a blog, as I mentioned, at drkarenboyd.com/blog. You can also get a Mission First AI starter kit for free. It does not sign you up for a mailing list unless you want to. I would love it if you want to sign up for a mailing list, but no one has to. Just don't click the button that says sign me up for your mailing list. Mission First AI starter kit is at drkarenboyd.com/mission first, all one word. Some things to plug. I just saw the F1 movie this weekend. It's the first movie I've seen in the theaters in a long time, so that might be biasing me, but I had a lovely time. I also watch F1, so it was fun to be like, that's a real driver, that's a team principal, that's Lewis Hamilton's dog. Like it was, that was fun. My favorite podcast these days is Dungeons and Daddies. It's a actual play Dungeons and Dragons podcast. With some fun twists to it. And my last plug is, if you're thinking of going somewhere, maybe take a picture or just to relax, consider taking the train. The train is the best. I love the train. That's my always plug to people.
Yeah, I'll take the train down to San Diego. I've actually been wanting to take the train and I haven't in forever, but
I mean, you can see in my background, actually, this is a beautiful route.
yeah, I think that I actually kind of know where that is. It's what beach is that? I feel like I've driven.
Yeah, Torrey Pines, I think, is
Yeah,
one. It's either this one or this one, and then the other one's Del Mar. So.
and then Black's Beach if you go further that way. Yeah.
Torre La Jolla, yeah.
All right, great. Thanks for coming on, Karen. It was longer than I expected,
No worries.
but it was good. So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Great.
And if you ever want to come back on, let me know.
Great. Thank you. You and
Uh,
your whole audience can find me on LinkedIn if you want to chat about anything. I would love to.
all right, cool. Yeah, send me those links when we're done.
Will
All
do.
right, bye,
Thank
bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.